Karakia, we'll start the meeting. Whakate hao ki te uru, whakate hao ki te toga, kia makina kina ki uta, kia makakai, ehe ake ake kura, ehe hupa, hi ohu, ki hei, maori ora. Thank you. Apologies. We do have a couple, one from Pauiwi Kelly, who is absent today, and one from Councillor Free, who is going to be late because of taking her husband to the hospital. So do I have Councillor Randall is also not here, so we'll assume an apology from him as well. And Councillor Calvert, or do we have anyone online? Maybe we should take okay, we'll assume that they're all sorry for being late. Do I have a seconder for that? Thank you. I'll put the motion, which has been moved and seconded. All those in favour? Councillor Paddock, we're waiting on you to vote. Oh, you have voted. Okay, that's it. Thank you. Do we have any conflicts of interest? That's passed, by the way. Nope, no conflicts of interest. And I'd like to confirm the minutes of the last meeting, which I am happy to move. Is there a seconder? Thank you, Councillor O'Neill. Can we just vote on that? That's it. Thank you. I declare that motion carried. There are no items which aren't on the agenda. And so now we can move on to public participation. And our first public participant who wishes to speak to us is Roger Calkin. Roger, if you are here, could you come and present, please? And you have 5 minutes, including questions.
Thank you. My name is Roger Calkin. I address this meeting as the father of a grieving family that has lost a much-loved son. Sandy was an incredible young man with his whole life ahead of him. His death on 10 July 2021 was tragic and preventable. I would like to address responsibilities of the Wellington City Council around the public utility that is the Wellington waterfront. I watched and listened with interest to the meeting held on Tuesday, 5th of August. James Roberts addressed the issue of the current lacuna or gap in legislation around public spaces such as the Wellington waterfront. Mr. Roberts made the comment that New Zealand does not have a clear legal framework for public spaces like the waterfront. I would dispute that this issue is as simple as that. From my understanding of the coroner's findings, it was a case of there being an acceptance that Wellington City Council does have and accepts that it does have a statutory responsibility to keep people safe throughout the public amenity that is the Wellington waterfront. However, current legal framework does not have a clear framework for any authority to act in response to any failings of the council that leads to deaths or injuries in this area unless someone is undertaking work. In other words, it simply highlights a regulatory gap and a lack of accountability for safety incidents on the waterfront. I would suggest that while this regulatory gap allows the council to sidestep those accepted responsibilities from a legal perspective, there are still social and moral responsibilities that need to be considered. From our perspective as a family, having sat through 5 days of full coronial inquest and listened to evidence given by various experts from all sides, that these social and moral responsibilities have never been met. The coroner has also recommended that the current regulatory gap in the legislation be looked at, and I understand that this has been raised with the relevant government agencies. It is our hope that this loophole be closed so that the same level of accountability will be able to be brought to bear in future as can be expected in any situation where work is being carried out. It is clear from the evidence at the inquest given by various experts put forward by the Wellington City Council that there was a high level of frustration that they had been making very specific recommendations in respect of safety in this area over many years and that they have been ignored. This included highlighting risks in the area where Sandy died over several years and making a plea that this area be made safe. Unfortunately, these risks were never addressed. When asked by me if he felt that the Wellington City Council had done everything practicable to ensure safety of the public on the Wellington waterfront to prevent people from falling in and drowning, Dr. Frank Stocks replied with a very firm no. Dr. Stocks was one of the primary witnesses called by the Wellington City Council. I refer to your own agenda released for today's meeting at point 15, where it talks about drowning statistics released by Water Safety New Zealand recently. While it refers to Wellington Harbour as coming in at number 6 in the top 10 drowning black spots in the country, this actually refers to the entire harbour as compared to similar bodies of water throughout the country. The other figure is a second statistic that specifically breaks down the numbers that relate to drowning deaths that resulted from people falling or jumping from wharves or waterfronts in New Zealand. That figure states that between 2013 and 2022, 10 years, there were 18 drowning deaths across the entire country that met these specific criteria. 1/3 or 6 of those drownings that met that specific criteria over that 10-year period occurred on the Wellington waterfront. This is an extremely small area when you consider the totality of similar areas across the country. It also needs to be recognised that this statistic does not take into account the tragic drowning of Isaac Levings in April 2023.
Roger, your 5 minutes are up. Can you just sum up now, please, quickly? Thank you.
Okay. Isaac drowned in similar circumstances to Sandy's drowning. If we include Isaac's death in the statistics, that makes 7 similar drownings in an 11-year period in that relatively small area that is the Wellington waterfront. That is approximately 1 every 18 months. Our feeling is that that's an appalling figure and an extremely black stain on the reputation of Wellington as a safe city. I would suggest that there has not been another similar drowning death in 28 months now.
Thank you, Roger.
I would suggest the only difference is the temporary fencing that is in place at the moment.
Thank you, Roger. We don't have time for questions. Could I please invite Sue Coots of Zero Waste Aotearoa to come to the microphone.
Tamarie, it's good to see you all this morning, and thanks for giving me the space to speak with you at your meeting. I want to take a moment to appreciate all the hard work that you guys put in to keep our city heading in a positive direction. When I dial into the public workshops like I did on Tuesday, I can see how much time and energy that you all put in to understand the issues, what the impacts are going to be, and how each decision is going to help you achieve the goals that our city has set for itself. It's so important to us all that our city keeps making steady progress to bring this idea of Pōneke, this creative capital where people and nature thrive together, into reality. You've got a great compass to help you find your way through all these decisions that you have to make. You want to put in place resilient infrastructure that's fit for growth, and you want to set up systems to reduce waste. And you confirmed that in the long-term plan last year by committing to transforming the city's waste systems and working with your communities to mitigate and adapt to climate change. You've created a great roadmap for yourself and for our city with a zero-waste strategy and linking it in with Te Atakura. And there's a really good reason why Wellington City has these solid plans to reduce emissions and waste. It's because this really matters to the people of Wellington. We want to see practical action to address climate change and to reduce waste. And residents and businesses are depending on council to put the systems and infrastructure in place that they need to be able to do their bit. Making that happen is a really long game. You're in the middle of a process. You have invested in the sludge facility, 400 million plus. You've invested in the landfill extension, 35 million. You've invested in the work to get all this happening through the Zero Waste program so far. And you've signed off on the new curbside system and set aside the budgets that you need to do this job. This decision is one small piece in that puzzle. If you tick this job off and keep on moving, then you'll stay on track to meet your timeframes. And that means you'll meet community expectations about better recycling and composting services and less waste going to landfill. Building trust and confidence means working together and taking these steps to get robust, reliable, long-term organic solutions for the city up and running. Based on what I've read in the papers and heard in your workshop, your officers have done a good job of getting the next steps in place for you. This has already been through an affordability test in the earliest stages of decision-making. The original regional facility idea relied on the 3 local councils here. It sounds as though this Lower North Island concept would spread the capex and the cost and the risks around establishing a facility across a much larger number of customers. So you can play a leadership role in creating options for food waste at scale in the Lower North Island without having to carry all the risk. If the RFP doesn't throw up a practical, affordable option, then you've still got a great fallback to do a local solution at the regional landfill, the southern landfill, and the budget's there if you need it. The high satisfaction rating that comes with waste and recycling services in the city shows that your officers are doing a good job of managing the big contracts that they have already, and it makes sense to me that you would trust them to move through this next stage in the process. So how does local and community fit in? The good news is that you can have both. You can have a regional solution and local solutions for organics. There's still a gap that needs to be filled, and I would encourage you to work alongside community organisations and small businesses across the city to get organics options in place for households and businesses that won't be covered by the new service. Great opportunity to focus your energy and resources on local economic and community development, and you could start working on that right away. At the workshop on Tuesday, there's quite a few questions around the costs and risks of progressing the procurement, and a lot of that was around pricing and the gate fee into the organics facility. But it's really useful to take a step back and to ask what are the costs and liabilities that are going to start stacking up if you don't progress this procurement. Falling back to status quo would have a lot of costs and risks as well. It's a very inefficient use of money if you drop all the work that's been done so far on the Zero Waste program and go back to the drawing board. Spending $35 million to extend the southern landfill gets wasted if you fill that landfill up really quickly. You have to find a new landfill, truck all your waste out of the city. You won't be able to control the gate fee for that. You won't own the landfill, so another operator will keep all the surplus instead of it coming back to council. And the ETS and the waste disposal levy charges are going to keep on going up year on year regardless. It's in the city's interest to fill up southern landfill as slowly as possible with things that there are absolutely no other options for. This year, central government set aside $30 million in total for the Waste Minimisation Fund. The priority is really big projects, and the only thing that they're going to award funds to is organic solution that reduce methane to landfill. If Wellington and Hutt City get involved in a large project, it's much more likely to be allocated funds, and you would have to hope that $10 million in public funding towards the capital cost would get reflected in a lower gate fee for you. Participation rates were also talked about the other day. Looks like 55 to 60% is considered average in Australia and Germany, and New Zealand food scrap collections average about 40%, but it's very early days for most of them. City like Seattle in the USA is achieving 60%, and there's really great rates across Italy, going from 54%, some as high as 85%. Dunedin at 50% is looking really good considering they've got all those students to wrangle. It's not realistic to expect that you could put a new system in place and everyone will be using it perfectly on day one. It depends a lot on committing the budgets to behaviour change work and education and doing that work required to get people on board. In Auckland, community partners are being used to reach into communities and to get them engaged. And Auckland's 35% participation rate is good, considering that they're just getting started. Fortnightly collections for rubbish won't even kick in until 27-28 at the earliest, and their next step is doing some trials on that to see how that fortnightly collection is going to go for their communities. Based on the discussion about who would use the curbside option at the workshop on Tuesday, I'm guessing that a lot of you probably own your own homes and have some kind of a section. Reality is about 40% of the city's households are renting, and having a compost bin is probably not an option for most of them. Density is increasing over time. You're looking at adding 30,000 more households over the next 30 years. And yeah, that's less opportunities as you get more dense, less opportunities for composting at home. Curbside collections or community gardens and composting facilities are going to be the primary option for people. So thanks so much for listening while I put these ideas on the table, and I encourage you to just keep on making the steady progress with getting these waste reduction systems in place so that households and businesses across the city have a really good chance of doing their bit.
Thank you. We do have a couple of questions for you. Councillor Paddock.
Thanks, Sue. I presume as you talk about growth, you're not expecting that there'll be a growth in waste, that you want to see those decoupled.
Yeah, I guess that what I'm saying is that as you get more and more people in the city to hold your, to hold your waste arisings at the same level, each household has to generate a lot less. You really want to be moving to a system where you've got much less going into the landfill, and you can preserve that really expensive space long time into the future. You won't have to invest in another landfill in the city, and you really want to divert everything you possibly can into other systems. And if at all possible, you want to do it in ways which are going to generate economic activity and development, community development in the city.
Thank you. Councillor Wadera.
Kia ora, thanks for that. You mentioned that by effectively outsourcing the creation of the facility, we would be avoiding risk, namely in capital expenditure. Do you think instead we might be adopting a long-term risk of creating essentially what amounts to be a regional monopoly on waste processing?
Well, I think that there's two ways you could play it. There's, what I heard the other day from the conversations is that it's always really good to have some big guy that wants to take the risk of getting something up and running and having lots of small customers feeding into that, which is what I would say Wellington City would be. Maybe there's all the councils in the Lower North Island instead of just the 3 Wellington councils that originally came up with the idea. So that means that you guys don't have to carry the load for everything. And I think that you have a really great opportunity in this city to build on what's already here in terms of community facilities. I know that some of the iwi are really interested in getting involved in organics and composting side of things. And so I think you've got some really great opportunities to start building up in parallel local processing, local facilities, local composting options as well. And then in the future, they may become your main gig and in 20 years' time, which seems like a lot, but it's actually not when you're thinking about the planning timeframes that you guys are working with. You could be free of the regional facility and have all your own stuff going on here.
Councillor Chung.
Thanks very much for coming in this morning, Sue. Much appreciated. I think that we all want the same thing. So do you think that we can actually still consider less expensive ways of doing this? Like, we have a lot of people who are recycling and have their own compost bins now. And so these people they will feel as if they're being penalised because we're applying a blanket situation, a blanket process across the whole city, whereas they want to continue doing what they're doing because they can use their compost in their own gardens. It doesn't need to shift it anywhere, it doesn't need to go on trucks. So if we can actually find a better way of doing things and less expensive, would you consider that?
I think that what's been proven in other cities around the world and in New Zealand as well is that it's good to have a big comprehensive system. Once that's in place, you can start looking at how you might be able to rebate people who are not using the system or people who are using less of the service. Mm-hmm. But I would argue that the affordability work that you guys did a couple of years ago, or maybe it was at the LTP time, showed that this solution is more affordable than what people have already, and that it's for most households it's actually going to reduce their cost rather than increase.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Your time is up. Thank you very much. I'd like to invite Angela Wilson of the Ohiro Bay Residents Association to come and speak to us. In fact, she's online. So, Angela, the floor is yours.
Kia ora, thank you. This submission is made on behalf of the Ohiro Bay Residents Association, and thank you for allowing the opportunity to make this oral submission in support of what I've written down. This submission is focusing on the areas of the organics processing, focusing on Ohiro Bay and the broader Te Kaupahu Reserve and the planned bus depot. These relate to the general business items of 3.4 and 3.2. And I'd like to thank the Council office officials for the work they've done to develop the documents and for the committee's consideration. Owhiro Bay supports the Council's effort towards waste minimisation and waste management. We support the organics processing and have been eagerly awaiting the rollout of the curbside collection. And we support option 3A, which currently reflects alongside Hutt City Council to enter into service arrangements with a third party seeking to establish a Lower North Island organics processing facility. However, we want to draw the committee's attention to the concern within our community, which is echoed the concerns around the options that include increased truck traffic through the Brooklyn Village and Owhiro Bay. We acknowledge that although this was discussed at the Southern Landfill Community Advisory Group meeting with an OBRA representative, the item was presented without prior notice for OBRA consideration. Our community is concerned about the increasing number of and size of trucks transiting through the Brooklyn Village Owhiro Bay corridors to the Southern Landfill and the private landfills that operate from Landfill Road and Happy Valley Road. Our community is concerned that any organics processing facility will increase this burden. Our community is also concerned about the impact increased truck traffic will have on the proposed trailhead for Tūāpapa Reserve. We support the proposed trailhead development, and we note that the proposed site 221 Happy Valley Road is intended to provide safe access for reserve trekkers to enjoy. It will also provide parking and toilets, potentially attracting additional visitors. This site is located very close to the junction of Landfill Road and Happy Valley Road. It's on a blind corner, and the bend in itself is also difficult to see around. The Rārangi Way subdivision main entry and exit points are very close by, as is the Murchison Street corner. Our community is concerned that additional heavy traffic in what will become a complex and potentially hazardous stretch of road. Our community is also concerned at the proposed bus depot for number 2 Landfill Road, recently purchased by the Greater Wellington Regional Council. At the site, 80 buses, predominantly diesel, will be garaged on site with approximately 75 in regular use. And this could incur up to 300 bus movements in a day, in addition to the trucks used for supporting organics processing. Our community is very concerned that the increase in heavy traffic will adversely impact Happy Valley Road. Significant work will need to be completed to support the heavy traffic demand, which ultimately will compromise Owhiro Bay stream and potentially may have impact on the marine reserve nearby. We are also concerned about neighbourhood safety with all the heavy traffic that is being proposed. The Owhiro Bay corridors, which include travelling past the school and kindergarten. Currently, we experience a spectrum of respect for road speed by trucks and buses, especially around the coastal intersection of Happy Valley Road and Owhiro Bay Parade. Also up along Happy Valley Road in particular, once we get to the park area of the school and O'Hara Road, and also the esplanade between Owhiro Bay and Island Bay. And I just want to point out that this is at all hours of the day and night, and we can often hear trucks hurtling past at 5:30 a.m. and 9 p.m. So in conclusion, Owhiro Bay supports the organics processing and have eagerly been awaiting the rollout of the curbside collection. We appreciate the current progress the Council is making towards waste management minimisation. OBRA is very concerned about the increase in heavy traffic proposed by the initiatives of the Council and the Greater Regional Council and the impact this will have on community safety, roading infrastructure, Owhiro Bay stream and the Marine Reserve. OBRA appreciates the opportunity to raise awareness to the committee the many developments that are occurring within Owhiro Bay that appear to be happening without coordination and communication with residents and between local and regional councils. Thank you.
Thank you, Angela. We don't seem to have any questions, so thank you very much for your presentation.
Good. Thank you.
And I'd now like to invite Kate Walmsley to come to the lectern, if you're here, and give us your presentation. You have 5 minutes, Kate.
Tēnā koutou katoa. My name is Kate Walmsley. I live up in Kōrau. Thank you so much for the opportunity to come and speak to you today. I appreciate it. Sorry for reading off my phone. I'm just going to my notes in my very long document. So organics and food waste are an issue really close to my heart. It takes all of us. I have been involved with KaiCycle, which is a local urban food growing and composting initiative for nearly a decade. I've recently stepped back. And I'm also a elected member of the Wasteman's Organic Materials Sector Group Steering Committee. So I wanted to start by a tōtoko for what Sue said, and that this decision is much bigger picture to unlock broad waste and emissions reduction, and going with the recommended option will enable this. Personally, I would have loved to see a local solution, but as Sue said, we can work on both, strengthening community embedded processing to improve curbside engagement as well as broader benefits. Today, I actually wanted to hone in on the procurement process that will happen if the preferred option 3A is adopted. It's so important to me that there is careful consideration of the process so that we get the best outcome possible given the long-term commitment. It's likely there will be a 20-year contract locking us into whatever processing option is decided upon. So I wanted to kind of, share my thoughts that as one of the major cities in Aotearoa, we have a responsibility to ensure that our organics will be going to good use, processed into high quality, uncontaminated organic products that will have a suitable end market and will give broader benefits to our wider economy and environment. High quality organic products can help restore our eroding and depleting soils and support primary sector actors to transition to more regenerative and lower emissions growing practices. Low quality organic products, or those excess to end user demand, risk exacerbating contamination, e.g. with microplastics, not being able to be sold, and possibly ending up in landfill or wastewater treatment, which would mean a very expensive exercise to wind up in the same place as before. So I do think that while obviously Council's mandate is focused on Wellington, because we're looking at moving our organics out of the city and they'll be sold and used outside of the city, we do have a broader responsibility to consider those implications. A 20-year contract will run till 2048, which seems so far in the future in terms of our changing climate and world. So I do think it's really important that this procurement process and decision carefully considers climate and other ecological impacts as well as climate resilience. While the RFP is tech agnostic, like it's independent of processing technology, which is important, I think broader things do need to be taken into account. I just want to paraphrase a 2020 report by the International Solid Waste Association, which is called The Benefits of Compost and Anaerobic Digestate when applied to soil. So compost helps replenish and build soil over time and helps sequester carbon in the soil, while long-term beneficial impacts on soil of anaerobic digestate have not yet been demonstrated scientifically. That may have changed since 2020, but I just wanted to share that summary. So when looking at the short list of processing options in the RFP process, wider climate and ecological impacts should absolutely be taken into account, because they'll have an impact on Wellington's production or consumption-based emissions and of our wider country. I also just did want to note that we've also got these two large-scale anaerobic digestion facilities already operating or committed to in Auckland or Christchurch. Are we potentially going to see a flooded market for digestate? So it's important to make sure that the RFP process doesn't happen in a vacuum, considering Wellington only, but also taking into account what's already locked in around the country so that we can make sure we've got these good end markets for high-quality products in our small country with limited markets. Procurement must keep the scope broad so that a wide range of possible processing options can be compared and get the best option. Keeping the scope broad will help Council find an option that keeps ongoing costs down, keeps the length of contract commitment acceptable, and ensures that our organics will be made into high quality products that were actually beneficial for growers and our ecosystem. I understand there's already a short list of providers from the 2023 request for information for a regional processing facility. I'd say it's important to make sure that potentially suitable, affordable processing options haven't been filtered out of the picture already, because this is such an important decision with long-term impacts. I wonder if it could be worthwhile suggesting that the procurement process to date that has resulted in the shortlist of providers could be reviewed to make sure it's still fit for purpose and is captured all the possible processing options and make sure it's truly technology agnostic. And I'd argue that to do that, the procurement should be geared around the outcomes from the processing facility, like limiting odour beyond its boundaries and the production of high quality, uncontaminated organic products, instead of the features of the facility itself. For example, is it indoor or outdoor? So this would help capture all possible solutions, including lower
Kate,
cost.
your 5 minutes is up. Do you just want to sum up?
Sure. So just really important to get this procurement process right, and climate and broader considerations are paramount, as well as the resilience of the option we choose to go with. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. We don't have time for questions. I would now like to invite Paul Ridley-Smith of the Oriental Bay Residents Association to come to the lectern. Paul, you have 10 minutes.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. I don't intend to take 10 minutes. Look, councillors, I've presented to you many times in the past, I think as you know, and this is actually the most difficult one that I've done, and I generally present on economic matters. In this case, there's no reference. You have the paper, the Oriental Bay Residents Association supports option approach A, and failing that, consultation. But the reason why I wanted to orally present is that I think I can bring some professional expertise to the decision that you're making. I was General Counsel at Contact Energy, and I was Chair of Manawa, or Trustpower Manawa Energy. And Manawa Energy had, we think, the most exposure to waterways of any company in New Zealand. We had 35 dam structures, we had lakes, we had rivers, we had canals. We had many circumstances where we had to consider the risks of water to people and society more generally. So I do believe that as chair of that company, I've had to consider the same matters that you're considering today many, many times, and I wanted to bring my insights as to how we approach that. And the simple answer is that we believe that fencing is not generally the best option. And I'll tell you when we do believe fencing is the best option, that is when there were high structures, dams 20 or 30 metres high, or where water is turbulent or fast flowing, or dam intake structures where people would be sucked in, and also at the bottom of dams where water would come out. But generally where the heights were low and the water was generally still, we believe that there were many other priorities that would achieve better safety outcomes. And I commend the Council. Many of the things that you've done are absolutely the right things. Lighting, ladders, buoys, ropes, supervision, and things that lead to good behavioural change. Where we got to is that we believe that better and more responsible safety outcomes came from that type of approach. So my encouragement to you, Tia, is to stay with the track that you're on and deal with those mitigations that you've already got in place, and think carefully about how behavioural changes can make things safer. So, to give an example of, Councillor Brown, who, as you know, went under a bus many years ago on Willis Street, and I'm not raising that flippantly, but at that time, and I can say this in office, there was consideration to putting a lot more fencing down Willis Street in those high risk zones. And where the council got to at that stage was to go, no, there were better solutions, which was to use street furniture to create visual barriers and to create softer barriers that, rather than spending tens of millions of dollars, I'm sorry, I have now resorted to some money, try to fence the entire city, use other devices that inculcate into people behaviours that significantly reduce the risk. And I think the council's made the right sort of decision there. So that is the thesis. I realise this is really, really difficult decision for the council, and it's challenging. But I do think that if you went with approach A, you would be being responsible, and I do believe you would get broader, better safety outcomes for the city and people. But happy to answer questions.
Well, we do have questions. The first one is from Councillor Abdul Rahman.
Thank you, Paul, like always. And the first one is, according to Council's own risk assessment, according to Council's risk assessment, it is ranked high and very high in that area. Also, coroner's inquiry is just suggesting to do something. Are you saying ignore that, ignore the Council's assessment as well? Usually you are into those kind of...
Look, I understand that. Look, I've presented before, And I've always taken the position that that officers provide you competent advice and present it in good faith. And nothing I say now suggests that I don't believe that it's not competent or in good faith. But I do think you have to understand, and I've prepared these sorts of papers professionally when I was General Counsel at Contact, or if I've approved them. The absolute tendency is to present the most conservative position. You actually feel as an executive, well, I'm speaking for myself only, obviously I'm not speaking for the officers. You want to make sure that you do present the most conservative position so that you minimise risk to the lowest level. And I do feel when I read the papers here and then when I read the butterfly advice that is what has happened here. It doesn't make it easy for you. I can understand that, Councillor. But I do think that that's what's happened here.
Councillor Padda.
Thanks, Paul. Have you read the coroner's report and are you familiar with the expert advice? Right. Okay. So yeah, and are you also aware that children have fallen into the water?
Look, I'm not. I'm very cautious about getting into specifics because I feel that's not respectful or right in this environment. I'm trying to approach this from a policy point of view, which is given what you can do, what would give you the greatest confidence that you've done everything that is appropriate to improve safety, not just in one area, but in a holistic area, right from Oriental Bay, where we come from, right through. And I think that's how I'm approaching this.
Councillor Chung.
Thanks very much for coming in this morning, Paul. Much appreciated. You know that the council has actually been installing lighting. We have life buoys around there. Do you think that, based on your professional expertise and opinion, that we can actually improve that lighting, or can we actually improve what we've actually been doing?
Look, I can't get drawn on that. What I would just say is the principle of it is really good. Whether there is enough or whether there should be more ladders or more buoys, I know you'd have to get. There are people who could do that, but those sorts of approaches I think are the best ones. Yeah. What I would say, having said that, is I do think myself, and this is not an expert view. This is just my view, that fluorescents really help. I mean, the situation you're really concentrating on is the accidental fall, right? I mean, people who jump in on purpose, fences, clearly do nothing, right? Clearly know that. It's the accidental situation. So my own view is that greater use of fluorescence would be useful. But it's a subject matter expert matter. So.
Great, thank you very much. Much appreciated.
Councillor Abdul-Rahman.
Just one more question. Yeah. Do you want to say also, regardless to the consultation, do you think it will make any difference consulting on this issue when we know what the community's view out there, if we're going to make a decision based on the council's own assessment and the coroner's inquiry?
Well, look, in the Opera submission, I think I make the point that when council says it is going to go out for public consultation and it made that statement, then it doesn't, then you've got to have a pretty clear reason to reverse the position. Look, I think if you did go out to wider consultation, I would produce a more substantive one and a more evidence-based one than I have in sort of 2 days. I think others would do the same. I think you would also get a lot more input, and this is not what I wanted to address today, but of really what the amenity value of the harbour is. And actually we want people to go there, right? It's our jewel, one of our jewels. So at a architectural and a use level, it is the wrong message. And again, this is a different point, to fence it off. So I think I think you would find if you went out to consultation, you'd get a significant number of people who would say, I want to make this as welcoming a place as possible for leisure and activities. I just do want to stress one other point. On the legal side, I absolutely do think wardens and safety training for when there are events down there is a really good idea. The paper does say that, but I do think it's a really important point to stress. It's a good way of managing risk.
Thank you very much, Paul. That's much appreciated. That's the end of our public participation section. Now we have petitions. The City to Sea Bridge petition. Can I please welcome Bazad Zamani to introduce the report? Thank you, Baz.
Kia ora, councillors. My name is Fars, the Tanako Program Manager. We are here to introduce the paper on City to Sea Bridge petition. I consider the paper is read and we're happy to answer any questions.
Councillor Abdurrahman.
Farhad, just to relate it to the petition, do we know when is the court's decision coming back? Any idea?
No.
So once it comes back, are you going to wait for if there is a potential of appeal to take any action, or it's going to be straight away action kind of?
We have to wait for a period of time to allow for the appeal period, and after that we can take action.
Thank you.
Councillor Wadera, did you have a question?
Yes, could we scroll down to see the recommendation, please?
I said it. That's your question. Okay. Councillor Chung, your question.
Great, thanks very much for that. There's a significant number of people who have signed this petition, but do you think that this issue is actually important enough for us to take it to a full consultation or larger consultation with the general Wellington populace, or do you think that this is an indication, or do you have a good feel for what people think about this?
Thank you, Councillor. I believe that we have done consultation on the City to Sea Bridge previously, and the decision has been made to demolish the bridge on 5th of December last year. If there is a decision by the court and there is a different kind of action we need to take, we will bring back to the councillors the different options to take those actions, and that's up to you whether you want to reconsult on the decision again.
I've got a small question there. Do you recall roughly how many people actually submitted on the public consultation on this matter when we actually did do public consultation?
Yes, so in the paper it states we received 1,273 submissions on the bridge.
Great, thank you. We don't seem to have any other questions, so perhaps I think we actually vote on, I'd like to move the, you can move the paper. Councillor Paddock, and I will, Councillor Young will second. So is there any debate? Does anyone wish to actually?
Could I just very briefly speak?
Yeah, sure.
Is that all right?
Of course.
Very briefly. Kia ora, councillors. Look, it is with great pleasure that I do introduce this paper. As you know, some of us, including me, have had great concerns around the demolition of the bridge, finding it an excellent solution to the problem of connecting our wonderful Tanako with our wonderful waterfront. And my view still is that it should not be demolished. So it's great to see the public participating, continuing with the campaign to raise a number of issues around why it should be retained. Kia ora.
Does anybody else wish to? Councillor Young would like to say something.
Just very briefly, so I have pleasure in seconding the paper. It is amazing the feedback we've had from the public about this bridge. It is clearly something that people feel very strongly about, and it is a very safe way of going across or above the road. So I'm delighted that we have received this petition, and thank all the people who have signed the petition. And I actually scrolled through all the signatures to see how many people I knew. Quite a few.
Does anybody else wish to say anything about this matter? No? Is there you have a right of reply even though nobody said anything? No, you're okay with that? Okay, I'd like to put the motion, which has been moved and seconded. Can we just vote on that, please?
I'm voting yes.
Thank you, Councillor Free. And that is passed unanimously. We now have council submission on going for housing growth, which of course is something which we're strongly in support of. And I'd like to welcome Sean Ordain to it just looks like Sean. I don't know, maybe he's got his team. Perhaps he could introduce his team to us as well as the report. Thanks, Sean.
Good. Thank you, Councillor Brown. Good morning. I've brought with me Susanna Goebel from my team and the author of the submission to help answer any questions that councillors may have. Going for Growth is one of the government's core policy platforms, and it is broadly the reform of the infrastructure, land use planning system and infrastructure financing systems. It's arranged into a series of packages. This is package 4, I believe. Yes, package 4. I get them mixed up occasionally. Which deals with matters of national direction under the Resource Management Act. In particular, it is asking for views on urban development in the new resource management system, the introduction of spatial planning into the legislative framework. So we do spatial planning at the moment, but it is done as a matter of practicality rather than as a matter of law. It also asks for comment on housing growth targets, the calculation of development capacity, how additional capacity and responsive planning should take place, how infrastructure should be dealt with, what the reporting obligations of water entities should be, how business land capacity should be dealt with, urban-rural boundaries, intensification on public transport corridors, walkable catchments, minimum building heights, and a number of other specific provisions to do with outdoor balcony spaces and bicycle parking requirements and mixed use. So if you have any particular questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Councillor McNulty.
Yeah, just two. The first around the housing growth targets, it becomes a point of population growth accurate or not. Obviously, the government's legislating proposed growth targets essentially on our behalf with that projection of plus 20%. So that discretion is almost taken out of our hands. So in terms of practical impacts for how that might flow into the organisation from a planning perspective, preparing for infrastructure, very wide-berthing question, but quite interested to understand the practical impacts of what that legislative change might look like for us.
So in terms of a flow chart, what that would do is move into the Housing and Business Assessment, which is a statutory document that we prepare with the other councils in the region that sets out the housing and business land capacity, so the development capacity. That higher set of projections would mean that you needed to have more land zoned to demonstrate sufficiency. You would then need to move down into the enabled capacity. So if we think of regulatory capacity as the box that you can fit buildings into, the enabled capacity is the amount of capacity your pipes, the wires, the infrastructures of the city can sustain. So those HBA, Housing and Business Assessment projections then flow into the future development strategy, which is where the utilities coordinate with the city what their investments should be, and then that flows into your long-term plan. So what you would expect to see over time is that the demand for infrastructure through your infrastructure strategy would increase, and then that would flow into the financial system. That would also then interact with the development levy and development financing changes that the government are making under one of the other Going for Growth packages.
Beautiful, very well allocated words. The other question I just had, or just to pull out, I just want to pull out the point. So the government is mandating the abolition of bicycle parking requirements. We obviously pulled them out via amendment quite recently, but the government will be passing that on a national basis, and there would be no delegation for councils to put those requirements back in.
Yes, that is my understanding. So you would end up with a situation where there would not be parking minimums for bicycles or car parks or cars, and that those would then become matters of discretion for developers, so they would choose to put them in accordance with market demand.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Pettit.
I've got 4 questions, so could I just ask 3 and then go back on the list?
You could have all 4.
Okay. Sean, you know my concerns around the focus on growth. Do officers see that there are finite resources which cannot be infinitely used, such as fossil fuels and water? And I'm not being sarcastic, I just don't understand the rationale.
Well, given the contribution of minerals to the earth by meteorites is minuscule, I think we can say that they are functionally limited.
Yeah, so where do officers see the limits are? Because we keep talking about growth.
The difficulty with determining the limits of growth is you must get into questions of utility and efficiency. So, for example, if we were to look at projections of oil consumption, there were many ideas of peak oil in the early 2000s due to innovations in the way markets allocate fuel prices and exploration, etc. Those limits have been found to be more flexible than anticipated. We're seeing the same thing with lithium. So the difficulty with determining those limits is at what scale, and then how do you reduce a global limit to a city? There is also the question of displacement. So, for example, if you have a person who chooses to live in New Zealand, living in central Wellington is one of the most sustainable places they can live. And so if they don't live here, they need to live somewhere else where they'll have a bigger footprint.
I'll leave that for debate. Next question is the walking. I didn't quite understand you made some points around people's capacity and topographical constraints, but the limits that we agreed to were reasonably extensive, and you think there's a point too also where you say that it could be made even bigger with some of the government's changes. So how does that actually fit in with the fact that we have a wide variety of ability within our population to walk?
So what the government is doing is defining what walkable means in effect. So this is one of the things that came up during both your own deliberations and the independent hearings panel, where there was essentially 2 definitions on the table. One, walkable as in the ability to walk there, so physically could somebody notionally walk there, had nothing to do with the actual individual ability of that person or their desire to, versus the likelihood, ability and desire of somebody to walk. And that's effectively where you had the rather extensive debates that took place. In effect, what the government have done is decide to put forward a proposal that be standardised around distance. So you would lose those topographical considerations. In effect, the proposals that the government have made would be somewhat larger than the zoned catchments we already have.
You support the differentiation between the provision of housing and environmental protection. How do you think, or the officer's view on how the environment will be protected given the issues around growth?
So what the government seemed to be proposing both in this package and within the wider RMA reform is a separation between planning law and environmental law. That is how it is done in most jurisdictions. New Zealand is unusual in having a single hybrid statute that does both. In terms of how you balance the needs and well-being of people against the conservation of the current environment, that is the type of question that democratically elected people are elected to work out. These proposals will still allow for that balance to take place. The question for you is, do you believe that you would have the latitude necessary, should these proposals go through, to make those decisions?
Just the last one around water. Are you confident, again, this is another political issue, given we've given up control of our water, that we'll be able to get the outcomes we want?
I don't understand the question.
So we are not, given we're not going to be owning the assets, given that many decisions will be made by an independent organisation, are you confident that we are going to get the outcomes that are stated here with another organisation delivering the infrastructure to support that?
So whilst the assets of the water entities move out to the entities, you still retain residual roles through the planning system in the consenting of and the policies around land use and infrastructure development. So you would move to a system more like that which is used in transport and electricity, where the entities are responsible for the delivery of the infrastructure, but they need to interact with the regulatory systems you set. I suppose the counterfactual would be, do you believe you have attained the environmental outcomes you wish with control?
Thank you, Sean. I think that's the end of the questions, but actually I just got one very small one. I mean, as you know, we, as a city, favour densification over greenfield development. In a general sense, is that the flavour of this policy? You know, I mean, are we moving more to growth, paying for growth, and restrictions on and greenfield developments? I mean, or what's your feeling about the way the overall policy is actually going?
The overall policy, to my reading, is to go both up and out.
Up and out, so it's kind of even Stevens.
Everywhere.
Right. Okay, thank you very much. That is the end of the Q&A, so I'm happy to move this paper, and I think Councillor Matthews has seconded. I don't really wish to speak. It's a great paper. I found it very complicated, but quite fascinating. Does anybody else wish to say anything? Comment? No? Okay, shall we just put it... Oh, sorry, Councillor Paddock. You told me you were going to be succinct today.
Well, that was on another paper, Councillor Brown. Right. At the moment, there is a big fight on the Denniston Plateau. The kind of very good environmentalists are trying to stop the mining of coal. Coal is a disastrous substance to burn. That coal will be converted into steel, which this council seems to be in support of implicitly. I do not accept that actually our carbon footprint is as good as it might be said to be. It's because it's farmed out all around the country, whether it's the raw materials we use or whether it's the dietary choices that we make. And so when we look at our carbon footprint, we think we're looking good, but actually the burden should be shared amongst all those who consume. And we know that the people who have the highest incomes tend to consume the most. So while this is kind of a technical paper and it's a precursor to more substantial change, I won't be supporting it. It's just, for me, fundamentally, philosophically and policy-wise flawed. We cannot have eternal growth. I note the advice of the officer, but nevertheless, the point is still that we cannot burn fossil fuels. We just cannot. We have to stop. We are in very deep trouble as a planet because of the growth ideology which has dominated particularly since the 1950s. And this council, from my perspective, has just not engaged with the issues around growth. I had a useful conversation with staff working on the water area, and they understood my point. Water as a finite resource cannot continue to be taken. We will all have to use less if we're going to have more people living in the city. And water is not the only thing we need to use a lot less of. So, I continue to be disappointed, if not devastated, about the fact that this is where we have got to, that we have a policy direction which doesn't think about the planet and its resources and the fact that we need to leave some for future generations. Kia ora.
Thank you. Councillor Matthews.
I have to say something now. People have to live somewhere. And to say we're anti-growth in that we will not allow for more housing means that they have nowhere to
Point of order, it's misrepresentation.
I've not said anything about you, Councillor.
Well, I've been the only one who's spoken, so yeah.
Sorry, I was thinking of better thoughts. Okay, let's continue.
This submission is not an endorsement of the use of coal or fossil fuels. And yes, there may be aspects of the government's programs that are problematic from both that councillor's perspective and my own regards the environment. But the Going for Growth program is, as this submission states, is kind of largely in the direction that our council has been going with our decision making about housing densification, which is actually the greatest intervention that we can make to allow people to live while with reducing their emissions and using less. So I want to thank the team for actually quite a balanced submission. I don't agree with every word, but I do think it's broadly supportive of what the government is doing and broadly reflective of the decisions this council has made in these areas. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Chung.
Great. I'm all for increasing the housing growth and looking for new ways of building and places where people should live. But I also think that people should actually always have a choice about where they choose to actually live, and why they live there. Now, when one of the comments that Councillor Pennant just mentioned about steel, I agree with her that if we're looking at intensification in the CBD, by necessity, we're building up, we're using a lot of concrete, we're using a lot of steel. And building apartment buildings, you just need those things. I tend to think that if we build more houses sort of in the outer suburbs, building them out of timber, it's a much, much more ecologically better way of actually doing things. Now, I understand, of course, the infrastructure that's actually required to get people to and from those places, but I think that with the way that we're actually working now is that we're getting a lot of people that are commuting into the city 3 days a week, and the other days they're actually spending in their own community. So I think that would minimise the effect on the infrastructure actually required. And the other thing is, I've been talking to a lot of building developers about where they see Wellington going, and they say that at the moment they don't want to build any more high-rise apartments because they just don't think that the market is actually there for them anymore, and it has actually reached a peak. So I wouldn't encourage any more greater intensification in the CBD and in the city. I think that we should get a balance. We should give people what they actually want, give the people a choice, and intensify building into the suburbs. And I understand all the connotations that brings, but that is where I'm veering to go now with greater housing. Thank you.
So I think we're getting slightly off track here, but Councillor McNulty, but just remember we are talking about this submission, so if we could just, rather than our views about life, the universe and everything.
It's always fascinating when you can tell who's read the paper in depth and who has not. Council is not building anything. We're just legalising housing. If developers don't want to build, they won't build. That's it. Well, it's always interesting. We seem to have this almost communistic heavy hand that comes in from some of the conservative right at this council about wanting to intervene specifically into market forces. Very, very bizarre. This is, and I just want to talk about why we have this bill in front of us. This bill is an allergic reaction to 30 years of councils across this country constricting the ability to build housing up and out. And you know what happens when you spend 30 years advocating for making it harder to build housing? The dam cracks eventually, and the gates open, and then you get bad legislative outcomes. And you get outcomes that might not be nuanced or might not actually acknowledge the topography of our city. But that's where the government's gone. They've gone to a sledgehammer because that is the way that New Zealand's councils have planned for decades. They have planned to constrain supply. So my generation is locked out. Terry's generation is locked out. Nico's generation is locked out. Geordie's generation is locked out. They are locked out into high rents. They're locked out into needing to file a deposit for a house that they will not afford. You did this, is what I am saying. This is now, so if you don't like what the government have done and what bill is in front of you, That is a reflection on choices that previous councils, not just in Wellington and Christchurch and Auckland, have done over decades, and that is why we have such a sledgehammer approach that lacks nuance, that throws out some fair environmental protections. But you did this.
Does anyone want to claim that they are the you that we just heard about? No. I have the right of reply. I'd just like to thank Sean and his team for writing what I found, as I say, was a very interesting submission. We all hope that this piece of legislation does progress, and we certainly support the policy of the government to actually improve the ability of people to build affordable housing where people want to live. So let's just, I think we now vote on this. Have a division, sure. So if you could just vote yes or no. Or you can try yellow if you just fit. You can't. Okay, I'm told you can't. Ray, you're the. Thank you. That's almost unanimous. Thank you very much. Well, let's move on to one more topic before we head to morning tea, and this is the proposed land acquisition at Happy Valley Road. And I would like to welcome Sarah Jane Still and Dee Chan to introduce the report. Thank you.
Kia ora, councillors. This paper is to request that the committee recommends to council to approve the acquisition of approximately 249 square metres of land adjoining 221 Happy Valley Road to vest as legal roadland. So this proposed acquisition is required for two purposes. One, to resolve an encroachment of the formed carriageway and footpath into privately owned land, and also to provide a suitable and safe access to the new Tūāpapa Reserve entrance development. So the proposed acquisition would be paid through existing transport and infrastructure budgets, and the land is going to be maintained as part of council's roading network going forward. I'll take the paper as read, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, looking at the visual overlay, there's a entrance that council could already build from a little bit further north of where the bottom end of this parcel is. So is this acquisition purely because our ideal design is that we have a one-way road leading through this reserve rather than just have a two-way single point of access?
My understanding is we would like a separate entrance and exit point, but also that northern section is slightly more difficult to develop than the southern part.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
So in the paper, the 2019 Outer Green Belt Management adopted in 2019 and a follow-up in 2021, potential of new 3 trailhead locations. This is one of them. Could you please remind me the other 2 where they are? And also, what was a priority back then in 2019 is still a priority in going ahead?
Yes, we've got somebody from our parks team to answer this.
Kia ora, councillors. We also have Tim Harkness online, who is our trails specialist as well, to help answer questions. So your question, councillor, was around where are the other 2 trailheads, is that right?
The first question, where the other 2, and the second part to that is if it's still a priority to do what was made a decision in 2019.
Yep, okay. Tim, are you able to elaborate on the other 2 trailheads question, please?
Hi there. The other 2 trailheads for Te Kopau Reserve is up by the Brooklyn wind turbine and at the Ofero Bay entrance.
So one up the top of the hill by the wind turbine.
Is that by Hawken Hills Road?
Up in that direction, yes, where the wind turbine is, up there, yep.
Okay, the other one?
And the other one is down on the south coast, the...
Other side of Ofero Bay?
Yes.
Okay, the second question, is that still a priority?
Yes, so this, the development of this potential trail entrance was identified in the Outer Greenbelt Management Plan and the Te Kopau Trails Network Plan. And the Outer Greenbelt Management Plan signals that we look into it and look to deliver the project sometime between 2024 and 2029. So so it is a priority for us, and we have been working on the proposal for a little while now, and consulting with the stakeholders about the proposal.
One more question.
Yes, sorry, could I just butt in before Narendran finishes his question? So, have the stakeholders, has the Trails Trust and the Brooklyn Trail Builders and whatnot, have they actually endorsed this location as a sort of a priority for an entrance point to the tracks that don't actually exist at this point?
Tim might better elaborate on this, but yes, we have been talking at length with the trail organisations about this location, and they have supported the development of this entrance, particularly as it creates a safer entrance point than the current situation.
So, but the current situation, you just said that Harrier Bay and the wind turbine.
In this particular location, the tip trail comes down just north of where the new entrance is proposed, and all of the parking and etc. is on the road shoulder there, right before the bend and the landfill road. So it's,
Sorry, Councillor Abdulrahman, sorry, I butted in there.
Cool. My last question is, how much money currently exists for similar land acquisitions through the existing transport budget?
So typically our land acquisitions aren't funded through existing budgets, so we would be using all of the service lanes budget, and then the additional would come through the remaining budget for that acquisition.
So that means the motion in 2021 in nature was a bit against the policy. Is that what you're saying? Because that is where the decision was made to allocate money from the transport budget to land acquisition of such a nature.
No, so we determined that these budgets could be used for this acquisition recently because it's going to be vested as legal road land.
Okay.
Councillor Rogers.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify the statement you made in paragraph 22 in the paper. It talks about legalising it as road and talks briefly about the widening of the footpath along the formed road of Happy Valley Road.
Mm-hmm.
That's in the instance if the site was developed as an entrance for Te Kopahu Reserve, otherwise we would not need to acquire the land.
Yeah, correct.
Cool. Yeah. And then just on the stakeholder support for this location, it was my understanding that Trails Wellington were also interested in a separate site along Happy Valley Road as the trailhead for some of the trails around this area.
I have to get Tim to answer that question, if possible.
I believe Trails Wellington has some interest in developing an entrance where the current TNT landfill is, but that's more directly going into the Waimapihi Reserve as opposed to Te Kopahu Reserve.
Cool. And then the other thing was just around the delivery of this. Were you looking to deliver this prior to the delivery of the trails? Because I had heard that from some stakeholders that they would want to see the trails develop first, and then based on how many people were using those trails, we would look at whether investment in something like this was really a priority compared to some other projects in the town belt.
We're going to deliver the trails over a long period of time. So the first trail will be the trail that will connect the entrance into Te Kopahu, bypassing the lower tip track, which is currently a steep, unsustainable, not particularly accessible trail. And then each year would continue to work through delivering the current trails plan.
Okay, one more.
Sure.
So in that case, do you have an indicative timeline of when this program that we're enabling would be delivered? You kind of said between 2024 and 2029, but is there anything more certain than that?
Are you asking specifically about the entrance development? Or
Yeah, apologies, the
development of
entrance development.
Trail network.
The entrance development.
Tim, are you able to answer that one?
The delivery as currently planned of the entrance would be starting in June 2026 and run through to later in 2026. And the trail delivery would start early 2026, so it's in place for the opening of the entranceway. And then we could carry on with the trail development beyond then.
Cool, thank you.
Councillor Randall.
Thank you. Given this is a roading project, can I ask, is there any NZTA co-funding for this?
No, there's not.
Okay. The intention of the new trail, what grade, what level of difficulty will this trail be? I mean, is it like anyone can do it, or is it really going to be quite steep and challenging?
Tim?
This new trail would be built as a relatively accessible trail, much more accessible than the current tip track. So it'd be shared use, about 1.5 metres wide, and ideally sticking within sort of 5-degree slope, which is quite gentle compared to a lot of our older walking tracks. A lot like what we've been doing in the northern suburbs, in the Forest of Tawa and Skyline Extension.
Okay, and if this parking doesn't go ahead, where is the nearest off-road parking that cyclists could use? How far away is that?
I don't believe there's anything close. Most of the regular users now will park on the road. I'd have to have a look.
I could perhaps just give you some because I ride down there quite often, and actually there's a lot of sport in the ground that's immediately sort of across the road. And most of the cars of parents, for instance, who are playing in the sport, they park on the grass off the road.
Sorry, I'm just not very familiar with the area. Thank you.
Sorry, we've got Councillor Free. You've got a question.
I do. How much has this been driven by the fact that we have irregularity in the legality of the footpath, etc., and how much has been driven by the need to have another entrance?
It's mostly driven by the need for the Tūāpapa entrance, but it will resolve that ongoing encroachment into the private land, which has been an issue for quite a while.
And is there any way you can give an indication of the quantum of money that we're talking about without giving away anything too commercially sensitive? I mean, how big is this quantum?
Are you talking about in regards to the acquisition or for the development itself? So we've had the land valued at 95,000, and so we're currently negotiating with the owner on that. I think we are very close to reaching an agreement in a similar price range for the acquisition itself.
If I'm allowed one more question, how much will it cost us to have the track developed, or is that going to be a project undertaken by volunteers and cyclists?
Tim, can you answer that one?
The track with the high level design we've currently got will be about $150,000.
Okay, so a big proportion of the input will be voluntary.
No, that will be a contractor build.
Oh, okay. All right, thank you.
Actually, can I a follow-up question on that point? Can somebody give me some idea of what the Macro Peak car park facilities and trailhead cost there, just so we can give it a sense of what these things do cost when they're actually installed to that standard? Yeah, any idea what that cost?
Tim, do you have any idea? I'm not so sure.
I wasn't directly involved in the Macro Peak car park redevelopment, but I believe it was around $1 million about 6 years ago.
Yeah, I thought it was 2, but anyhow, okay. Councillor Chung.
Great. Now you talk about a major part of this reason is to improve the access without encroaching on private land. To change the entranceway. So have there been any issues regarding using this entrance as it is? Like, are there any safety concerns, or are there any pressing issues that we actually need to be doing this at this stage?
So the entrance to the tip track, there is no current car park there, so that is for the development. We would have to, in order to access the land in the area that we require as the safest access point, we have to purchase that land because it goes over private land.
Yes.
So there are I believe some safety concerns around the fact that people are parking on the road, and if we have an increased number of vehicles, sight lines and things can be difficult from the northern for in and out.
Okay. And the second question is a similar sort of thing, but maybe targeted at Tim. Are there any issues, or is there any objection from the current landowner to actually have a track on his land as it is? Because it doesn't seem to be, looking at the images, it doesn't seem to be used for anything else. Like, would there be any objection to actually having the track there now?
The track wouldn't be on that land.
Oh.
The track is on our land.
Yep.
We're purchasing this land only as an access point.
Okay.
The tip track, Ray, comes down. No one in their right mind rides up the tip track, but so it's not really an entrance point because that track isn't really viable as an entrance to the area. So this is strictly an entrance point to the new track, which the council may start building late next year or the year after.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you.
Councillor, sorry, I've got Geordie down here. Sorry.
It was just a process question. If the paper wasn't accepted by the committee, what the next steps would be?
So we would likely have to look at the entrance development and ascertain whether or not, one, it would be possible with the road access that we've currently got, and redevelop it if possible. Yeah, that would delay the project, obviously.
So I guess if, in terms of the project that the land acquisition is enabling, if councillors wish to provide direction for that, you would need an amendment along those lines?
Are you talking about changing the actual makeup of the proposed development?
Correct, yeah, the entrance on the land that we already own, yeah.
I imagine so.
Councillor Young.
Has there been any discussion with the landowner that he develops it?
No, we wouldn't expect that of him.
No, but he could do it as a profit centre.
Tolling it.
I doubt he would want to.
Paid car parking. Councillor Free, I think we've got you.
Yeah, just on the car parking thing. Is it? How are you proposing to manage it so that it's there for the intended purpose, but also may be available to other users when it's not so well utilised?
Are you asking if we would have some sort of paid parking element?
Oh, I guess I am, actually, if we're going to start providing parking. Or, how do you envisage it being used when it's not fully in use? Will it be available to the public some of the time as well? I guess that's the question.
Well, in theory, yes, it would be available for the public, unless we looked at parking management measures like time limits, that sort of thing, but we haven't contemplated that for this area at this point in time. I guess we could if it became an issue.
I suppose this relates to a broader question of, are there parking pressures in that area that this could help alleviate? It's sort of an extra benefit over and above what you've stated for the tracks.
I'm not aware of parking pressures in this particular location. It's more providing safe parking for users of Te Kopaho who want to get into the reserve from this location.
And I guess my other question is, if we didn't go ahead with this, would it be more expensive to try and establish an alternative somewhere else, an alternative entrance somewhere else? I mean, is this actually the cheap option, even though it involves a bit of expense up front?
I might get Tim to elaborate, but I don't think there are a lot of other location options for creating something like this. It was sort of canvassed as part of the consultation on the Outer Greenbelt and Management Plan and the Tūāpapa Tracks Plan, so there's not a lot of alternate locations. This one makes sense because we've already got the tip track kind of there, that's.
Can I have a response from Tim? Thank you for offering.
This is the only point where Te Kopahau Reserve touches Happy Valley Road in that area. So we've either got the coast up by the Hawkins Hill wind turbine, and then there's this point.
Okay, thank you.
I think let's just move on to Liam Hodges to actually have a little bit of a summary of this, because it does strike me there's a level of confusion and uncertainty about this, which may not go well for the recommendation. So perhaps there is an alternative.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, look, I'm just trying to provide a bit of context here for the councillors, and I'm sensing some discomfort with this particular proposal. This is a council officer initiated attempt to strategically acquire land to deliver a network that's already been adopted by council. And as we all know, we've got a very strong mountain biking community, a very good walking network across our Greenbelt and Outer Greenbelt, and this is part of that long-term strategic plan. I think what I am hearing, though, is that there is a lack of information of context, and even Tim's done a great job to articulate that online, but I think what would be very helpful if officers went back and perhaps laid this report on the table and provide some better context for council. We could do that via a briefing and walk them through the trail network to answer Councillor Nuridan's point around what are the other two, where do they connect, and again explain that this is a long-term multi-year program of making the city a pretty impressive mountain biking and walking city. So that would be my suggestion on your leave, Mr. Chair, or go to debate by all means, but that's just a suggestion.
I support that.
Let's have morning tea. Let's just adjourn for morning tea at the moment, and we'll have a chat about this, and after morning tea we'll see what we come back with. How about that? So it's 5 to 11 now, so let's give ourselves until 10 past 11. Ian back to sum up where he feels we should be going on this matter. Could the people at the back of the room, please sit down and stop talking? That would be really appreciated. Thank you. So at the moment, it would seem on the basis of the Q&A that we've just gone through that there is quite a high level of uncertainty about the strategic merits of this, even if we understand the specifics. And it feels to me as if it would be better for this to be postponed for a subsequent meeting where officers can provide us with a greater briefing about the overall context. And as this hasn't been moved or seconded, we are at liberty to postpone it or effectively to sort of leave it lying on the table, if that's the terminology. So if everybody's happy with that, but Councillor Pennant has a question.
Just a process question, Liam, like how we sort of got to this. Was this sort of discussed quite thoroughly? Generally, it's not ideal to withdraw at this time.
Through you, Mr. Chairman. No, I mean, that was an earlier point, Councillor Pannett. So this is an opportunist attempt by officers to fulfil a strategic objective, and they're moving quickly because they see an opportunity. So, and that's where the lack of context is coming, and some of the questions I'm hearing. So, I think, as the chair suggested, this is the best way forward for this particular matter.
So, if everyone's okay with that, we will turn the page and move on to item 3.3.
I just had a question, please.
Oh, sure, Councillor Calvert.
Thank you. Yeah, no, look, I just wanted to know, whilst officers appreciated the strategic aspect, did they take into account our financial situation at all when they brought this forward or were planning on bringing it forward?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, yes, they did.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, now we have moved on now to item 3.3. Now, as I sent you around a note yesterday, we're all aware that this is a highly sensitive matter, and as you're also aware, as I made it clear in my email, I hope, normally I'm only too delighted to allow people to debate things to their heart's content, but I think in this particular issue, we do need slightly stricter protocols and rules, and I think I set it out in my email, so hopefully everybody understands it. So if there's a slight change in tone from the chair, I hope you understand and don't blame me too much. But please be sensitive and please follow the rules. And we will now move on to welcome James Roberts and Christy Law and Kara Basher to introduce the report. Thank you. And by the way, those rules around also cover the audience in the back of the room as well as officers, so everybody's covered by them.
Kia ora koutou. So just like to say up front that I moved into the role of Chief Operating Officer about 22 months ago, and I know that prior to that and since then there's been a huge amount of really diligent work done on this question, this deadly serious question, certainly by our waterfront team, our legal team, our urban design team and our health and safety team. And I really appreciate all the work that they've done. Today's paper follows our briefing on Tuesday, and I'd like to just take this opportunity to provide some additional clarity after the discussion that we had. A lot of questions related to why now and why aren't there other options, so I just wanted to address that. This paper is only about part of the waterfront. It is just the Kumatoto and part of the Queen's Wharf areas. It doesn't include the outer T on Queen's Wharf, and it doesn't include the Ngākina Lagoon in Kumatoto. This part of the waterfront that I'm talking about, only balustrading is deemed to be reasonably practicable as edge protection. The reason for that is the promenades are narrow, they're highly trafficked with multiple transport nodes, they're subject to crowding and congestion during events, and they have a high concentration of bars and restaurants. For this part of the waterfront, our advice is that given the limited options available, which is either balustrade or do nothing, you are able to make that decision today, enabling officers to get on and address this outstanding public safety issue without delay. For the rest of the waterfront, Frankitts Park, Taranaki Wharf, Tūāpapa Promenade, Clyde Quay Wharf, there are multiple practicable options, and public consultation can help guide your decision making. A key factor driving the recommendation to proceed with work on Kumatoto in this part of Queen's Wharf precinct without public consultation are the recommendations made by the coroner in the Sandy Culkin inquest. A coroner's inquest is an independent, high-integrity, transparent legal process, during which all relevant factors related to the death are considered. The coroner found that there were not adequate and appropriate measures in place to prevent accidental falls from parts of the waterfront. Coroner Gregg recommended that the council gives urgent priority to the edge protection project and that it prioritises erecting permanent balustrades around the Shed 5 Wharf in the Kumatoto precinct, the part of the waterfront we're talking about in this paper. While the lighting work completed helps the public to be able to see more easily where the edge is, it doesn't fully remove the risk of an accidental fall to the water. The coroner found that council's approach has given lighting higher priority than edge protection as a safety response, and that insufficient priority has been given to edge protection. The coroner referred to 3 prior safety audits done in 2011, 2013 and 2016, all of which identified the need for improvements in edge protection. We have exhausted options and approaches to enhancing edge protection in this part of the waterfront. If council wants to improve public safety here, there really is no other way of doing it other than what we have presented in this paper. There were also several questions raised about the cost of balustrading. The balustrading needs to meet the requirements of the building code and stand up to the conditions of a marine environment. We also want it to need minimal maintenance and have a long lifespan. If the recommendations in front of you are approved, we will of course use a competitive tender process to ensure we get a price that provides a fit-for-purpose solution and value for money. This is a fundamental part of how we work, ensuring we follow robust, fair, auditable and transparent processes to procure services and materials. That is what we will do in this instance as well. I'll take the rest of the paper as read and pass back to you, Mr. Chair.
Councillor Padditt.
Thank you for your work on this. Just 2 questions. I have subsequently heard about how another child has ended up in the water. I had asked Mr. Binney about just to give a total number of reports of people who had fallen into the water, particularly children. Have you got that information?
In front of me, I only have the reported incidents. I don't have the number of children in those incidents.
But you're aware there were at least 2 children?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, thank you. And look, in a way you have made a different point to the one you made at the start. But do you feel, given the coroner's comments, which I've just reread, that we did everything that we could in 2016 that we needed to do?
So the coroner's findings in respect of the Sandy Culkin's death is that inadequate measures were in place on parts of the waterfront at that time.
Councillor Abdul-Rahman.
The first question is, what is the consequence of the council not bringing this paper at this stage, if not, or this council not voting on this paper today?
The consequence is that it would take us longer to put in place edge protection.
The second question, what is the consequence of the council today voting against the officer's recommendation since it is health and safety? Is there any legal consequence either for the governing side of the council or the bureaucracy or the whole council in general?
So there would be no immediate legal consequences. It's a difficult question because of the mix of it being a public place and a workplace. So there's not really a legal liability, generally speaking, in terms of it as a public space. But if we're looking at the waterfront at times when it is a workplace, then there potentially is liability for the chief executive as an officer under the Health and Safety at Work Act, and whether he's undertaken due diligence duties. And then there's also the obligations for council as a person in control of a business or undertaking around whether it's actually taken all reasonably practical steps to ensure that the means of entry and exit and the workplace is free from risks to the health and safety of people essentially in the vicinity of that workplace.
One more. Do you agree with one of our submitters this morning when they say that there is a regulatory loophole where you can't say this is council's responsibility or government's responsibility currently, because as you said, you can't identify it as a workplace or a public place. But if someone from our council is working there and that incident happened, we are responsible again under the health and safety requirement.
Yes, so that's the regulatory lacuna that the coroner referred to, that there's no clear legal framework that says what you must or should do when we're just talking about public places in general.
Councillor McNulty.
Yeah, just some questions in the costing. So there's a product by Hampton that's building code compliant under F4, which is safety from falling. It's specifically designed for wharfs and marinas, and I understand that 2.4 metre height can be supplied and installed for about 2 to 3K per lineal metre with complete designs and producer statements. How are we coming in at 5.5K per lineal metre in comparison?
So, as I mentioned before, we would go through an open procurement process, so firms like the one that you're referring to would be able to bid for the business. Obviously, our intent, as I said, would be to find something that's fit for purpose at the best value possible. So if that comes through in that procurement process, then we would be able to use that. I guess what we don't want to do is we don't want to state numbers. Ideally, we don't want to state numbers, which we then have to come back and ask for more money. We don't like doing that, obviously. So we do take a relatively conservative approach when we don't have much information and clarity about what it's actually going to cost. In this instance, we've used our consultants, our discussions with Eke Panuku in Auckland, and the other investigations that we've done to identify a ballpark. We've run that by our QS, and our QS naturally is conservative when there's so much variability and uncertainty at this stage of the project, and that's how we basically came up with that number.
Yeah. And one other one, so Nelson's Waterfront has a chain link fencing type product, and I know that's about $8,500 for 100 metres, which is rated for hurricane strength winds. So how is that not an appropriate option for some of these precincts either?
So it's a there are many examples around New Zealand and around the world of various different measures that have been taken to put up some kind of restraint or fencing type solution or balustrading type solution, depending on the particular conditions and circumstances of risk that is being managed in those different locations. And there are potentially different options. We have to work within the restraints of or constraints of regulation that we're faced with. We have to look at the unique circumstances of the risk in the areas that we're talking about, and that does limit our options in terms of what type of fencing we can use. But certainly the artist's impression that's been included in some of the pictures in the document is merely just an impression at this point. It is not an absolute representation of exactly what would be put there. We would go through the process of looking at what are the different balustrading or fencing options that will actually meet the requirements of safety for those particular areas. And we'll have a look through those, and we can then determine what is the preferred option.
Councillor Chung.
Thanks very much. Since we started installing lights and safety measures, the rings and things along the waterfront, I've walked along there several times at night, and I've talked to people along there about how do they feel safer with all this light coming up, because it's really well lit up now. So do you have any, I guess that's anecdotal evidence, but do you have any feedback from the public about how they actually now feel about walking around that area? Is there a perception of safety that's actually not there, or do they still feel that the waterfront edge is not clear enough to, or any reason, any feedback?
I can check with the team to see if we have any anecdotal feedback. I don't think we've done any kind of formal research to check people's views on it. And is anyone there from the team who can comment?
Good morning, Shane Binney, Waterfront Manager. We've received plenty of emails and feedback from our stakeholders on the waterfront, both emails from the general public who use the space daily. We've also received significant support from our stakeholders, Tūāpapa, the National Museum. They've congratulated us on the installation of the lighting, and specifically they've reinstated some of their security patrols outside because they were cancelled due to insufficient lighting in the area.
Mm-hmm. Great.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Randall.
Thank you. Early in this triennium, this council went through an exercise so that we could all agree on a level of default risk appetite or risk tolerance, which are sort of baseline statements about what is reasonable amount of risk that we would tolerate in different areas. And for the community health and safety, we had a statement which was sort of between cautious and flexible, which it said the council would make all practical and legally required steps to reduce the chance of harm to the public on council-managed sites. Do you think that the solution that's been offered is at that standard, or is it actually a higher level of standard that you're applying in this situation? I guess in this situation we have the benefit of the fact that there's been a coronial inquiry and it's looked at this and talking to a range of experts about it, and has come to the conclusion that these particular areas of the waterfront, not the whole waterfront, but these particular areas, they need to be balustraded, and that there really is no other option for edge protection in these areas other than what's been stated. Mm. You also noted earlier that there's sort of an odd choice between doing nothing and doing a lot because of the Building Act. The problem that's been identified by these deaths, unfortunate deaths, triggers the need to do something. And I accept that, and we are doing something in terms of lighting. However, because this is also, the wharf is designated a building, that actually also piles in a whole lot of other things. That means if we're going to protect a building, we need certain grill widths to support children crawling through and not being able to climb and that sort of stuff. Would you accept that that's actually part of the reason why the solution is the way it is? Yeah, if we are to put in edge protection, we need to do it to a consentable standard. So that obviously comes with certain requirements, as some of those that you've stated. And has the council looked at perhaps doing an exemption to the broad range of things that are required as a building, if the wharf is designated a building? Has the council looked at maybe getting an exemption to fit this particular circumstance so that we can have a more targeted solution to fix the problem that the coroner's actually identified, the safety problem? I think the solution that we have there does fix the problem that the coroner has identified. Okay.
Thank you. Councillor Abdul-Rahman.
Is there another coroner inquiry coming by the end of the year? So surely when that happens, there will be question, what have you done between now and then? And surely then, if this council make a decision today and saying that no or yes, your answer will be based on that, isn't it?
Correct. There is a further inquest that Coroner Gregg, the same coroner that did the Sandy Culkin inquest, will be doing on the death of Isaac Levings. We're not actually sure on what the timing of that is. It is upcoming, but we don't know a firm date for it. It will be, well, when we will be asked to provide information and potentially appear at that inquiry, we will be asked what has council done in terms of the findings from the previous inquest, and we'll basically say what has happened, whatever decisions have been made, and what decisions have not been made in that time frame. So yes, we will need to provide some response to the coroner to those questions from her previous recommendations.
So if you responded to them, we haven't done anything because
but Councillor Abdul-Rahman, I'd just like to point out that we have actually committed to spend over $7 million on improved lighting. We have also done a very thorough study. So it is absurd to put forward a proposition for which is transparently incorrect. We have done a lot. We have spent a lot of money. We've done a lot of research. As Mr. Roberts has said, the council, since he's been involved, the council has spent an enormous amount of time investigating this. So don't start from a question which is actually totally implausible and doesn't represent the facts. Stick to the facts.
I agree with you, Chair, but what I'm asking is what would be the answer between now?
He can't answer that because he's not in the coroner's shoes, and it's an utterly hypothetical question which is actually causing mischief, so you're not allowed to ask that question. Councillor Pannett.
James, just listening to your answers from Councillors Randall and McNulty, I understand the concern around the cost. And I also believe we need a high quality outcome because it's such an amazing space. But nevertheless, is there any way that there can be some amendment to just give colleagues who are worried about the cost some assurance that we will try and get it down? Because my priority at the moment is saving lives rather than aesthetics. But yeah, is there just a way through this a little bit?
There's always a way through. As we've done for other projects, you know, keeping you informed of progress, keeping you informed of how we're progressing with contracts, procurement, etc. We're able to absolutely do that in this instance. So, as I said to you before, we would go through. We do have a pretty good, rigorous procurement process, which we would absolutely use here to identify a solution that gives us the best value possible for a solution that's fit for purpose. And it will be an absolutely open and transparent procurement process.
That looks like the end of the question, so thank you very much. I think I will move the motion, and Councillor Matthews is seconding it. I know, but I think we changed our mind. Is there any debate? Has anyone wished to actually raise any issues? Councillor Pannett.
So I'd just like to start by recognising Mr. Culkin Jr. and the contribution that he made to Pōneke in our wonderful hospitality industry, and to acknowledge the life that he did not get to live. And I'd also like to thank the Culkin family for their advocacy and acknowledge their deep grief. I also want to acknowledge all the other families who have lost loved ones. I know that this is contentious. I've heard the concerns, and I might even have a little bit of sympathy for some of the points. But I do ask you respectfully to unanimously support the officer recommendations. Health and safety shouldn't be a political issue. We make interventions on safety all of the time in our city, in our pools, our streets and our parks. I do want to acknowledge the staff for all the hard work that they have put in, to the coroner as well. And we have had a challenge through the coronial process, and I hope we will rise to that challenge this morning. So I want to make a number of points. The coroner, unlike us, has heard all the evidence, and that needs to be taken seriously. We might all have an opinion, but we weren't there, as well as some members of the public. The coronial report needs careful reading and rereading. As a public institution, not just individuals, I believe we have very heavy obligations on us morally. Even if the legal lacuna doesn't talk about the management of spaces like this, we still have those obligations. And from my point of view, our first obligation is to keep people safe. I do think we need to take the evidence of Dr. Frank Stocks very seriously. Paragraphs 92 to 125 are particularly useful, where he did say that barriers really needed to be looked at, that it wasn't just a bit of a worry that someone would fall into the water. We know that people are. We know that other cities have fenced their waterfronts and are grappling with the same issues. And I also this is, very devastating that it is not just adults that have fallen into the water, children have too. We've got stats for at least 2 that could have been a disastrous outcome. The risks to this council, this table, is that while we didn't know about the earlier reports, we do know now, and I think our actions will be examined at the next inquest. The scale of the deaths is extremely concerning. A third of such deaths have occurred on our waterfront, and that, to me, seems to be clear that we need to take action. And I just was refreshing my memory all the time, went down by Kumitoto this morning, that the passageway is far too narrow. There's actually a safety issue with transport as well. I think we do need to take action.
Councillor Paddock, that's 3 minutes, so could you just wrap it up?
Councillor Brown, actually, given the way that people have been treated this morning, I would just like a few more minutes. NZTA has valued our lives now at 12.5 million. They were previously valued at 4.9 million. So I think in terms of a cost benefit, while it is a lot of money, and I recognise the stress that ratepayers are under, that's a pretty good reward. The last point I just want to make is that while I am generally in favour of public consultation, I think it's very important, I would really ask what is the purpose in this case. Unless we've got expert advice, people who have studied all the facts deeply, I think we could get we've already got a feel, some people are opposed, some people support. So I think what we need to do is rely on our experts rather than just my opinion, the person down the road's opinion. I am satisfied, given the coroner looked at it, that this is the right course of action. Kia ora.
Chung.
Thanks very much. I don't believe that there's anyone in this room, and in fact, and probably not even in Wellington, who doesn't want to protect people, want to make Wellington a safer place to be. We want to have these places where people can go and feel free, that feel comfortable that they're not going to be in danger by where they're walking, and it's our responsibility as a council to actually ensure that we do make the city safer. So any areas that are that can cause harm to people, yes, we absolutely do need to consider these things. But I feel that I'm trying to understand exactly what it is that actually causes people to sort of have these accidents, and what we can actually do to mitigate it. Now, it seems to me that a lot of these things happen at night, and I walk down the waterfront during the day, during the night. I've actually cycled along there, and I've actually seen the behaviour of people, what they actually do when they're down there during the day and also at night. And I have to say that walking down there at night now, I am so impressed with what the council has actually done with the lighting. It is almost like walking down there in the daylight. There's never any issue with actually seeing where the waterfront edges are. So I feel that we've actually mitigated a lot of that potential danger, and the feedback that I'm getting from people is that, it's so, we feel so much safer walking along here now. And so I want to actually understand what the benefits, if what we've done actually solves a huge part of the problems. Because people actually falling in there at night time, so the lack of light is actually obviously an obvious danger and an obvious mitigating factor in these things. And so I want to actually give it a little bit of time to actually understand and get feedback from people. We can talk to people who are down there. We can ask them how they feel about this. If they feel that we've actually done what we can to actually stop these accidents from happening. So I feel that we're actually rushing into something and trying to put out all the solutions that we actually can. Now, if we had unlimited money, that is one thing, and I'm very aware of the cost of things, but in this case, I think that we want to be doing the right thing, not doing everything. And so I feel as if we should give it a little bit more time to actually see the effect of all the work that we've actually done so far, and continue to complete the work that we're actually doing on lighting and life rings, lifesavers, whatever things, and ladders, so that if it happens that people do fall in, then they can actually see their way to a ladder to climb back out again. And it is at night time that these things are happening, because during the daytime there are usually so many people there that the danger, the risk danger of anyone falling in is far less. And so I do want to see the effect of what we've already done and continue finishing it. Thank you. And made it to 3 minutes.
Well done. Does anybody else wish to speak? Sorry, Abdul Rahman.
Kia ora whānau. I would also like to start with acknowledging those who lost their loved one. All the love and aroha to you, whether you are in this room or whether you are listening through different mechanisms. Councillors, there are 3 reasons why I support officers' recommendation of making the waterfront safe and accessible. First, urgent public safety risk confirmed by the coroner. The Calkin inquest made it clear the inadequate age protection contributed to a preventable death in July 2021. According to our own council's risk assessment tool, it is ranked as very high and high. The second reason, the legal and health and safety obligation. Under the Health and Safety at Work Act 2015, Council has a duty to eliminate or minimize known hazards where reasonably practical. The coroner's report is explicit. Permanent balustrade in this area are necessary to prevent more accidents. The third reason, some councillors argue that we should consult with our community. I'm the one who always been for that, actually. In this case, consultation is going to change, unlikely going to change the outcome of these 2 places. The coroner's recommendations are clear and site-specific. It's also backed by James, the manager of the officer who is in charge of this place. Public views on safety versus open space is very known, and consultation is not gonna change that. And for us not to make a decision today will put a council in a very difficult situations and going forward, and to some extent a bit of a negligence not to do so. I would finish with this. We cannot lose another life because we cannot afford to lose another member of our community. We must act now. Thank you.
Does anybody else wish to speak? Councillor McNulty.
I don't intend to speak long today, but given there's significant public interest in the decision, I just feel important to give a quick explanation for why several councillors, including myself, will be voting against the paper in its entirety. The vote shouldn't be construed as opposition to targeted safety improvements or some areas of fencing on the waterfront. Entirely supportive of those preceding. Would be comfortable to vote for such an approach today, but that's not the option in front of us. We have only the choice to fence the Kumatoto and Queen's Wharf precincts in their entirety. There's a clear need for safety improvements on the waterfront and for council to take action in response to the coroner's reports, and we have and we are doing that. On page 61 of the paper, it lays out several actions or areas of improvement that the council has completed or is in the process of actioning, and that includes the $7 million for lighting, life rings and ladders, CCTV, incident reporting and spatial analysis, waterfront manual, event management, buildings, commercial, wharf operations and commuter transport modes. So on this basis, I don't believe the proposal in front of us, noting the extraordinarily high cost on a per metre basis, is appropriate to proceed with at this stage. I'll be voting against the paper so that we can have some time given to monitor the effectiveness of the improvements that have already been made or are underway, and targeted safety improvements could be presented to a future council if required.
Thank you. Does anybody else wish to speak? Nope. Okay. What's your question, Councillor?
Sorry, I have an amendment to put in. Do I actually put that in first, or do I?
Yeah, unfortunately, administratively, you have missed your window of opportunity. So, no amendment. So, can we move on to vote? Again, I am the mover, and Councillor Matthews is the seconder of the motion. I've already done that. Sorry, I've done that.
Could we have a division, please? Thanks.
So, okay. So we'll take 1 and 2 together. Can we vote on those 2 together, please? Yeah, 1 and 2. And a division has been requested. Yeah, we've got that. Thank you. That is unanimously passed. Do we want to do each of the subsequent ones, or should we do the whole lot together? Should we do them all together? Is that all right? So that's 3 to 6. If you could vote on those. And that is lost. Thank you very much. We shall move on to the next topic, which is 3.4, Organics Processing Solution Business Case. And I would like to welcome Jenny Chetwin, Jeffrey Coe, and Stephanie Stedman to introduce the report. Thank you.
It's okay. Something to celebrate for them, but see.
Over to us. Okay, kia ora koutou. I have today with me Steph Stedman, who's back from her break. Hopefully you can hear me. And Jeffrey Coe is supporting this conversation as well. And Jörn Scherzer has come from Hutt City Council to listen to your debate and conversation as well. So I'm really grateful he's made the time to be here for us. I'll just make a few introductory comments and then hand it back to you, Chair, for questions, given the papers in front of you and the workshop we had earlier this week. So just a few opening comments. So today's conversation is about the preferred option for processing of organics. Specifically, you're being asked today to approve officers to proceed to the next stage of procurement to procure a service agreement for organics processing. That's the decision in front of you today. This is part of your wider decisions to move away from the current user pays collection service to a more broadly based, rates-based curbside collection service for all eligible households. This is a decision you've already made, and you took it on the 30th of May in 2024 at the LTP Finance and Performance Committee, when you allocated the funds to it. This was a critical component of delivering on your waste strategy, which was publicly consulted on, and the curbside collection service was flagged as a key priority in that strategy. So it's a very socialised, well-socialised decision that you've made there. The redesigned collection service, however, is reliant on us finding an organics processing solution and finding one that is robust for the long term and works for the city and works financially for us as well. You're being asked to decide this today. We had a few questions on that at the workshop, because you've set a time frame for the new curbside services to be in place, and your decision on organics processing is on the critical path for that time frame for the curbside service to be in place. Your decision today will allow us to move into the RFP process with confidence, to engage with the market with your backing. It's important. This decision is an enabler of much wider benefits for the community. We acknowledge from the conversations in the last couple of days there's a degree of trepidation and uncertainty from you about the procurement process, and the commitment that will be needed for the long term for this service to go ahead if that's what you decide. I want to give you some assurance today that every effort will be taken to ensure a robust and sound procurement process and a high level of focus on probity for that process. To that end, you should note that Audit New Zealand has been and will continue to oversee the probity of that process, and will ensure that all the wider impacts will be taken into account and keep the scope broad, reflecting what you heard from Kate Walmsley, sorry, how to pronounce her name, earlier today. A brief note on the procurement process to date as well. The prospective suppliers that were shortlisted from the registration of interest stage, that registration of interest stage evaluated criteria on supplier experience, track record, ability to deliver. It was the precursor to the next stage. The evaluation was technology agnostic and leaves that question wide open for the next stage. Respondents who received an overall weighted score of 60% were shortlisted, but the focus really was on their ability to deliver, not on their technology or the solution. That's for the next stage. We'll be agnostic on technology going into the next stage, so we don't show bias in the process and don't compromise the procurement outcome in the long run. In terms of the outcome of the procurement, you can be assured that if the resulting proposal falls outside the parameters you've set us for the rates and the time frame, or introduces a high degree of risk, or is inconsistent with the business case and puts option 3A at question, we will come back to you for another decision. If all goes to plan and we can proceed with the procurement and it comes within your parameters, it will go through our normal contract signing process, which the Chief Executive has authority to sign any contract in order to give effect to the annual plan and long-term plan decisions you've already made. He will need assurance from us that the proposal is within the existing budgets that you have set, and we will do that for him. And that is our usual practice for all of our contracts that we sign, and we sign some pretty big ones on your behalf. So I'll stop there, Chair, and open it back up to you.
Thank you, Councillor Randall.
This decision on the processing plant is part of the Zero Waste program. What's the status of the other part of the Zero Waste program with respect to decision making? That's the collections part. Is there a future decision to come to Council on that?
Through you, Councillor, there's not a future decision plan. You made the decision on the curbside collections back in the LTP, the financial side of it in the LTP conversation that you had. And my understanding, I wasn't here at the time, is that you had that debate as well during your zero waste strategy conversation when that was consulted on and when you adopted the zero waste strategy. It was part of that. Is that? I'll just confer with the team.
I believe the only other decision is around the targeted rate. So the design of the targeted rate is a point of consultation that will happen alongside the next LTP. That's not so much around whether that targeted rate happened, it's around the design and the structure of the rate.
Okay, so does that mean after this decision officers are empowered to sign up contracts and get services for both the collections project and for the organics processing project, and make commitments, long-term commitments.
That is correct within the parameters that you've set and within the delegations that the Chief Executive has, which I outlined earlier.
And is it true that the annual cost of the waste over the 10-year plan is going to increase from $33 million a year to $71 million a year?
So do you want to give us a bit more on that?
Well, in the long-term plan, just want to confirm that the cost of the waste activity is going to increase from $33 million a year to $71 million a year.
It's not something I can answer right now. I'm sorry, I'll have to come back to you on that. It's not something I have in front of me.
Okay, thanks.
Apologies, Councillor.
Councillor Chung.
I've been communicating with this company called Earth Starch in the Hut, and they've been talking to me about a proposal for organic waste, and they have a proposal where they can actually install these in, depending on where you actually want them, but throughout the Wellington area, and they can increase it as to the requirement at no cost to the, or very, very minimal cost to the council. And so they would put these waste disposal units where they're actually required, where people actually can find it convenient to actually come to them, and they will charge them per container that they actually bring down. So this would be a minimum charge, and they're looking at $3 to $4 or something per bin. And so it seems to me that we should investigate these ways of actually doing processing the organic waste rather than sort of going into a city-wide area, because it feels like we're penalising all the people who actually compost their waste at the moment. So the question is, why haven't we actually considered this? They told me that they actually talked to the City Council back in 2023.
So we've been running a procurement process, as we've been talking about, which has been open to respondents to provide registrations of interest. So it's been a very wide and technology agnostic procurement process, and respondents and participants have been able to participate within that. So I wouldn't say we haven't considered or have considered particular providers. It's been an open process that has been able to consider and include any number of respondents or providers.
Councillor, actually, I think that was kind of a bit of an off-piste type question. So can we move on to Councillor Wanera, and we'll put Ray back on the list if he wants to go there.
Yes, if we can't own the facility, could we perhaps own the trucks?
I understand what you're saying in terms of what council owns and what council puts out to services. So I think that's something we can look at during the procurement process. It's not off the table, but we'll go through procurement to see if that's an option.
Deputy Mayor Foon.
Yeah, just a few questions. One, administrative, could we table the Q&A, please? Just a second question, this is around the affordability. So can I just check that we've also got a resolution on the books that we will explore a lower cost model? I know this is not particularly about the procurement, but about the curbside collection system. Yeah, so sorry, when we voted the curbside collection system, there was concern around the affordability of the whole collection, and that for people that had waste reduction. So we did commit, as I recall, to researching that and trying to provide a lower cost option.
So that's what you were going before. Slightly different.
Yes, I can answer that. So as part of that original decision, there was a commitment that we would look at, I can't remember the right wording, we can find that for you, that there could be an option to investigate having lower cost bundles for lower waste households, and that still remains.
Great, thank you. The next one is actually around Lower Hutt City, and so just wanting to understand the driver for Lower Hutt to be involved in this procurement process, or the outcomes of this work?
So I'll ask Ewan to make a comment on that. But the driver, essentially the bigger the market we can provide for quantum of organics and green waste, the better. So that's the driver for keeping them in the tent. Through you, Chair, I might invite Ewan just to talk a little bit about Hutt's perspective.
Yeah, thank you for that. I can talk to that. So just want to recap a little bit, going back about 4 years when Hutt City Council embarked on changing its curbside collection system, and we had a number of objectives that included lowering emissions, providing a service that people wanted, increasing cost effectiveness, and as a result of that, we introduced a change for the rubbish and recycling collection part, and that resulted in a lower cost for the majority of households. What we did say at the time was there was no organic processing capacity in the region for food waste. There was for green waste, but not for food. And it wouldn't make sense for Hutt City Council on its own to actually develop that processing capacity. So we parked the decision on that at the time. We implemented an optional green waste service, but that's as far as it went. And then we commenced the process. At that point, Wellington wasn't actually involved. We initially worked with Porirua City Council on that, on a business case for a food and green organics collection service and processing associated with that. So that commenced around, I think it was about 2022, and as part of that process, Wellington City then came on board and joined into that process. And the key driver for that was, at the time, I was very clear that we needed to make sure we don't just develop a system that works for the Hutt. Ultimately, it has to work for the region, and it also makes economic sense to look at economies of scale. So a system that actually, or potentially a plant that can cater for not just Hutt, but Wellington or Upper Hutt and Porirua is likely to be much more cost effective to develop than just going piecemeal for each city.
Councillor Abdulrahman.
Just following up on that one, on that response then, does that mean where that leaves us if the discussion about amalgamations go ahead? Was it just about us doing versus contracting out?
Councillor, what's the question?
With amalgamation discussion, where would that leave us in the future if we are getting into this commitment, and if at larger level again it's a good thing to do? If it is good for those organizations to do, why it's not good for us to do it?
So what I think you're asking is if there's amalgamation in the future, where do we stand with a contract that we might have...
the first part of the question.
Yeah. So all I can comment on there is that in any amalgamation, any contracts that the current councils have might need to be readdressed in terms of what the new council looks like if that happens. So that would have to be addressed at the time. Auckland went through that when it amalgamated, and it would not just apply to a contract we sign here, but to all of our contracts. That's a big job.
What about the second question of it?
So what was the question? I didn't quite understand.
I think it was asked during workshop, and if it is good for those contractors or for private to provide those services, why is it not good for us to do it? Or is that because of the financials, the main drive in this case?
Do you want to say something on that?
So if I understand, so the question is, why wouldn't we do it as a council if it's good enough for the private sector to do it?
Yep.
In simplistic terms.
Yep.
I mean, this is the recommended option as a consequence of the cost modelling and the assessment we've done through the business case. There are different sets of risks and benefits of different models for how you might do this, and officer advice is ultimately that the preferred option around a contracted out service with a third-party provider provides the right balance of achieving the strategic outcomes and addressing affordability and financial risks. But equally, there are alternative models that are available and presented in the paper, which are available to you as decision makers.
Are there any other? Councillor Randall has a question.
How much CO2 emissions are going to be avoided through this process, and and how much would that be worth in terms of carbon credits per year? Is it about 2,400 tonnes or something?
Yes, I believe that's right. The paper talks about 2,400 tonnes. It talks about, I think, around 31 tonnes of embedded carbon in the transport solutions, which would come net off of that. I don't have available to me what the carbon credit impacts or equivalency would be.
That's just that's about 140,000 a year, I think, by my calculations. But I was wondering if you could confirm that. Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions? No, looks like not.
Yes, please. Sorry. I just put my hand up. So my question is about the carbon, actually. So is it intrinsically more carbon conservative to recycle the food scraps rather than bury them in the landfill? Because I was a bit concerned we're just transporting the carbon emissions out of our city to somewhere else.
So in terms of the carbon emissions, when you capture the methane from the landfill, you don't capture all of the methane. It's not captured. In terms of doing another solution, you'll create less methane, or if there was methane, it would be captured more fully.
Are we talking methane rather than carbon then? Is it really a methane, which I know is even worse a gas than for global warming than carbon, but what are we actually talking about in terms of?
Yeah, so we are talking about methane, which is created when organics break down anaerobically as they do at landfill. So it is correct, it's about 30 times worse than carbon, but carbon emissions is what's used as the simplified term. Does that make sense?
It isn't actually very clear. I wonder if we could receive some extra information about that. Obviously subsequent to this meeting, but still of interest.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I think that is the last of the questions. That's the end of the questions, and I think the mover of this paper is Deputy Mayor Foon, is that right? Yes. Do you want to speak to that?
Kia ora koutou. We are at a very important juncture on our pathway to zero waste by approving this RFP today, that we go out for an RFP and with the very important conditions that must be met as part of it. I do want to thank the officers for a very thorough work that has gone on behind this, and really also to the councillors for your thorough questioning, and we want that assurance, and that is why we are working so hard to understand it better. I've just got to say that being a customer was not my preferred option. I really prefer it that the council, the local council, that is owned by us, and the multi-benefits that come with that. But I accept that for this point in time, this might be the better option to go out and understand what our options are. And so after sludge, our organics and green waste is the next best resource for us to remove from the landfill. At the moment, it's about 20% of all of our waste and 55% of all curbside waste. And, you know, we're not the forerunners in this, and I just want to thank Councillor Pannett for your work in 2018 getting the trial collection happening in Miramar. That has been pivotal for us to be able to make this decision coming up to maybe 8 years later. So it does take time. But Auckland, Christchurch, Dunedin, Tauranga, Timaru and early adopters Kaikoura are already doing organics collection. And New York has just gone into mandating not allowing any organics to go into the landfill. So I think the important thing about today, and something that really struck me while I was going down the whole of organics, was actually lifting up this is an enabler. So it's not all about the organics, but it is about enabling our whole system to change. And this is the final the final point, because if we don't take our organics out of people's general waste, and by having the system change to collecting general waste every 2 weeks and providing bigger recycling bins, that is what is going to drive people to reduce waste in general. And the risks of not proceeding are real. We've invested in a new landfill, which quite simply we do not want to fill up quickly. We've got risks with our other landfills, Silverstream and Spicer, that are also filling up. So it's an ecosystem we have to think about. So I do ask for your support today. It's I think I just want to take also the amendment there, just have to acknowledge the local communities of Brooklyn and Awhiroa who really bear the brunt of all the transport going through their communities, and it is important we take a holistic view of the impact any decisions we have on them. So I think I just want to finish with the ultimate vision that our landfill is a taonga that we only use when really necessary. But we can only not use the landfill when councils provide mechanisms for people to choose another option, and that's what this is about today. So thank you for your support. Kia ora koutou.
Thank you. And I think Councillor Padditt is seconding, and you wish to speak?
Yeah, so thank you, everyone. And I guess the bigger picture, even than around waste, is around our resource use. Basic environmentalism, we just need to reduce the amount of resources we use, full stop. So this is an important step forward. Look, this has got a really, really long history, and it's very, very frustrating that it is taking so long to get here. You know, I'd like to acknowledge also former Mayor Wade Brown for all the work that she did to try and sort this issue out. We closed down the Living Earth plant at the Southern Landfill in about 2008 because of odour issues. As the Deputy Mayor referred to, I got 3 bits of money that year. I got money for resource recovery, for a business case for the organics processing and the trial. And the fact that it has taken 8 years is quite difficult. We do need to get faster now because we're actually falling behind other cities, and that is competitively quite problematic, I think. Generally, I would prefer that everyone had a compost bin in their house, or outside their house, or an appropriate solution for people in apartments. But I'm also realistic enough that some people just won't want to do that. And so the next best option, as we looked at through the trial, is a curbside collection. And I would say also the local solution does have costs, and I do feel sorry for the local communities in that area. It has been a burden for them. The shipping out of our rohi is always problematic, but at least I've been a little bit reassured that there's not too much movement. Well, that depends how much organics we eat. I guess just the 2 last points I'd like to make is, look, I wasn't keen on this first when the officers talked about it, is because I think it's too big. Like the whole of the, you know, I wanted to go really local. The whole of the Lower North Island just risks it spreading and taking years and years and years, or not getting enough customers. Also, the loss of control is really problematic because it means that we don't have the right to sort of control the policy direction. But nevertheless, on a positive note, it does cost a lot less. And I just wanted to finish by acknowledging my constituents who also want a collection service in the inner city. We haven't forgotten about you. We know this is really, really important. You have a right to equal services to those living in houses. So while we can't help right at the moment, that should be on the agenda for next training. Kia ora.
Thank you. We have Councillor Wadera next.
Kia ora everybody, I'm rising metaphorically, broadly in support of this paper. I'm going to use this speech to register my dismay that the business case has deemed the most efficient option most prudent option, to use a word that had pretty significant consequences earlier in the term, is to create a private facility. And I used the word create quite deliberately because we are hoping that a private company will build one from scratch. There is no existing private. We are hoping, as was revealed in the Q&A session we had yesterday, that one will be built. I would like to make the following point. We are unwilling, because of various capital pressures, to invest a bunch of money to build the plant ourselves. Okay, fair enough. However, somebody else is going to do it. Why is someone else going to do it? Because they will deem, if this undertaking is going to be taken up, that it will be profitable for them. And in the long term, they will make a profit. Definitionally, if somebody else thinks this is going to ultimately be a profit-making enterprise, then we are missing out on that profit in the long term by privatizing this element of the waste chain. That is really disappointing short-term thinking, in my opinion, just because we don't want to stump up the initial cash to get this off the ground. And it leads me to a broader point. I promise this isn't my valedictory speech. You'll get that later. But there is a logic to the society we live in, right? There are logics that underpin the movements of our organizations, the public ones, the private ones. It's getting harder and harder to tell the difference, and all of the other organizations that control the lives that we live. And it will always be the most logical thing, by the parameters of the society in which we live, to cut, to privatize, to be austere, to continually outsource things from public and democratic control because we don't want to stump up the capital like we are in this case. What is going to be required very soon, and in fact is always required and has always been required, is to think differently and reject these logics in order to reap the significant benefits of democratic control of the productive forces of our society. However, all that said, that big grump made, I'm going to be voting in favour of this paper, mainly to support my colleague, Deputy Mayor Foon, who has been a very tireless advocate of this for a long time, and I'm a pragmatic man, even though I really love owning stuff. And I think that voting against this paper would mean no organic collection, and I want organic collection. It's as simple as that. It's the only option we're going to get. But I would just finish the speech by urging officers to own as much of this chain as possible. There is a significant economic benefit, and logistical benefit, by the way, to democratic ownership of the trucks and the jobs they bring. I would like that to be considered. It's not an instruction, it's a suggestion. Kia ora tātou.
Thank you. The Mayor would like to speak.
Just very brief comments just to support the Deputy Mayor's comments. Thank you, officers, for this work. It's a big project, and it's really, really exciting. And thank you, Deputy Mayor and Councillor Pannett, for your previous work on this space as well. It's incredible. This will be eventually one of the best ways that we can address our climate emissions, and that is fantastic. Over 2,400 tonnes I heard earlier, and for that alone, I'm hugely supportive of this. I think we should be very proud. I think we should celebrate this decision if we move forward, because whether people like to admit it or not, we are in a climate emergency, and this is something that will help that. So thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Free.
Hi, thanks. Hey, I've I have been concerned about some aspects of this, but I will be supporting this. And I do thank the staff for a very considered and fulsome explanation of some of the matters that I was concerned about. I just want to reflect a little bit, because I grew up in the southern suburbs, and I remember actually when Carey's Gully, which is where the current tip is, was had a creek and a lot of bush, and then became our tip, and it was meant to last 100 years, and that hasn't proved to be the case, and that's a concern, because it's been filling up faster than it should have been filling up, and we've now made decisions that actually limit the landfill that can be provided there, and we need to make sure that we get maximum bang for buck from that landfill for as long as possible. That's partly why we've invested in sludge treatment plant, which the eastern suburbs communities actually have been fairly supportive of. But if we don't make that landfill last, then we're also not maximising the benefit from our sludge treatment plant. So the whole thing has to be considered together. I firstly was a bit amazed that we could save so much money by going private. I think if we can, it's a no-brainer, and we do need to support that. And the other thing about going privately and locating it out of Wellington is land costs are a lot cheaper out in places like Otaki or wherever it might be built, but it also does give the opportunity for other councils to come on board and benefit from the same facility that we'll potentially benefit from. I am nervous, however, that the staff maybe I have optimism bias, sorry. Sometimes things look really good and they don't prove to be quite so rosy when you poke into it. But I am reassured that if this doesn't stack up in the way that we've been told today, that there will be opportunities for them to come back and seek some further guidance from us. So I will be supporting this. I think it is part of what we need to do as a city. My son, just to mention New Plymouth, my son's family up there do have this exact scheme, and they're loving it. They love having their food scraps kept separate and being collected, and having their rubbish staying so much more sanitary and pleasant. So thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Randall.
Thank you. I'm going to be opposing this initiative because, quite frankly, I believe the zero waste strategy is unaffordable for this city. I also want to note that in terms of decision making, this is the last decision point on the zero waste strategy, because I've been informed by officers that the business case for the bin collections work has already been approved. So approval of this plant constitutes approval for the whole zero waste program. Now look, the zero waste program is expensive. In the long-term plan for waste, our annual waste collection costs are going to go from $33 million per year to $71 million a year. Yesterday we heard about the doubling of the cost for water, but we're also deciding to double the cost for waste for this city. Compared to status quo, it's going to cost $35 million a year more to proceed with the zero waste plan. And yes, sure, that's fantastic that we're going to save 2,400 tonnes of carbon. But on a per tonne basis, that works out at $14,500 per tonne of carbon saved at a time when the carbon credit cost is $56 a tonne. We're not paying 10 times the cost or even 100 times the cost to save carbon through this project. It's an incredible waste of money if your objective is to save CO2 emissions. Let's just pay the cost of the carbon. It's about $140,000 per year rather than $35 million. This also includes a blanket targeted rate that will collect $22 million in addition to the general rate support for the landfill. But because it's blanket and everyone must pay, it will hit many of those who have the least waste the hardest. This is people who are retired, people who are renting even will pay the cost in the end. But I'm thinking of people on fixed incomes who are going to, who already compost, who already work and are frugal, are going to be hit with this major rates increase. Let's face it, $35 million a year is equivalent to a 7% rates increase. That's what you're voting on today. And we heard from Councillor Winera, I want organic collection. I'm sorry, it's not good enough. I'm a councillor that recognises that we have to keep rates down and we've got to make some hard decisions. And for that reason, I'm going to vote against this, and I ask you to really consider seriously the impact of going ahead with this decision. Thank you. Sorry, one more point. Sorry, one more point if I can. I also make this decision is doubly important, knowing that we have received as elected members some information under public excluded. That means that making this decision today, I will ask you to take that into account. And I cannot divulge what that is, but it is important that we make it in the context of the information we have at hand.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Councillor Chung.
Thank you. Make no mistake, I am absolutely for organic recycling. I do want to reduce all the waste that we're actually throwing away. Personally, I can actually fill one yellow rubbish bag every 2 months, and I can do that easily. So I am looking at all the different ways of doing things. I've been having discussions with a company in Lower Hutt. They've undergone a successful trial in Upper Hutt. It's a system that's used in Taiwan extensively, where they have multiple points where you can take your organic waste and put it into their system where they'll recycle it. So they will charge between $3 and $4 for each person that brings a bucket in. So isn't that a much better way of doing things than spending millions on actually building this new system to cover everyone, to increase the rates of everyone, to actually charge everyone? All those people who are currently running their own compost bins, they're already doing the responsible thing. They're already doing what we want them to do. They're already reducing their waste. So isn't this better to actually have a user pay system where people can actually take it to these points, where there's garden centres that we can actually look at how we're going to do it. They can change the system to suit the number of people who want to use a particular station. Isn't this much, much better, and better for the economy, better for the city to do this, rather than looking at a massive city-wide project? So because of this, I'll be having further discussions with them on how we can actually do this, but they assure me that it will be either no cost to the council to implement this or very minimal. So I'm going to vote against this because I don't think that we've actually covered all the options that we can actually look at. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Matthews.
Kia ora koutou. I guess, first of all, I would note the submitters today from the people who are dealing with this, who are the waste experts, who are supporting what we are doing. Because actually, I mean, I know we all have this kind of fantastical idea that everybody is home composting and doing these wonderful things. The evidence does not support that. That is why so much food waste is going to landfill. And so I just we need to have our decisions be anchored in our reality, in evidence, and not our kind of reckons or best wishes about what people might be currently doing. I guess I'm sort of saddened to hear the status quo presented to us as affordable when only kind of one side of the ledger is being presented. First of all, the non-kind of dollar, about the impact of the landfill on our communities, as both of the councillors from the Southern Ward both, have such a good focus on our emissions, but also the dollars. And the idea that the status quo is continuing and is more affordable is nonsense, because we have to extend the landfill. And so we are looking at alternatives that will be much more affordable on all of the grounds and much better for our community in the long run. I guess, and it's kind of interesting when, and I feel your pain, Councillor Weneta, but I also wouldn't describe this as privatisation, because this is currently not being done by anybody. So actually we do have to make some hard decisions and pragmatic decisions about doing this organics processing in the most cost-effective and reducing risk way. And I think the councillors that want to hold the kind of the high ground of financial kind of rectitude are actually not recognising that the decision in front of us today is a massive reduction of risk and capital expenditure for the council. And it is also not a decision on the waste program or curbside collections. It is a decision on how to process. And the option that we have been given, I want to acknowledge Jenny Chetwin and all the work of your team for giving us a really easy decision, which is much better financially and lower risk for us. And I also really want to acknowledge Laurie Foon. This has been hard graft for you, and I have been proud to stand shoulder to shoulder with you over the last 6 years while you have been patient and kind to people, but persistent. And we are really getting there. And actually, this is an easy decision on a good day. Thank you, Laurie.
Thank you. Councillor Abdulrahman.
Honestly, I don't know how I'm going to follow from that. And well articulated, Councillor Matthew, and I agree with almost everything that been said. I'm also in a bit of a dilemma, to be honest with you. I just have to be honest and put it out there. I agree with Councillor Winera when he talks about privatization. I think he articulated well, and I just endorse it and leave it there. And I also agree with how we must address the climate action, how this is a climate action, and well articulated by Deputy Mayor and Councillor Matthew as well. I have an issue on top of the privatization, the equity issue, the local community's concern, and in the context of what we already know in public excluded meetings, what is coming in front of us and going ahead. So when I look at all those options and look at it, I'm just in kind of dilemma, but what I'm doing is I will be supporting some of the motions, especially targeting the community, addressing community concerns, like an amendment moved by Deputy Mayor, which is number 8, and the rest of them, but I'm not supporting number 2 and number 4 for the 4 reasons that I mentioned. 1, I have a concern of that privatization. 2, the equity issue. 3, the local community concern. 4, what we already know in public excluded meeting when it comes to how we do things, and that's going to play out and going forward. So here we are. But I really want to acknowledge Deputy Mayor's consistent advocacy in this space, and I know you have the number today to make it through, and you know you have my support. But in this case, I'm not supporting number 2 and number 4 of the motion for the 4 reasons that I mentioned. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Calvert.
Thank you. I'm not going to be supporting this. I think the presentation to us, as if we made this decision 2 years ago, and whilst the decision made 2 years ago, it hasn't taken into account that things have changed. People are doing it tough out there. We are under very strong financial constraints. MFE have cut back their contributions to this. We'll be lucky to get anything from them. Poirua has withdrawn. Hutt City have got things on hold. So this decision was made on the basis of a lot of other different elements which no longer exist. I just think it's really interesting that this is almost an exercise done on paper. I don't see any engineering oversight into this. I think we are putting such an emphasis on the environmental perspective, and that's great. But we've also got a duty of care around our financial and our operational and our overall governance aspects. Yes, so some of us have to take the high ground, but they're taking the high ground in respect of how do we balance the books? We're already spending $500 million into dealing with waste. We don't have enough money to go around. We have to cut our costs accordingly and share the funds that we do have. You know, this is going to be an extra 1% on the rates. People are telling us they're doing it tough. They can't afford the fresh fruit. They can't afford the fresh veggies, which would go into these bins. And we also know that we'd be lucky to get 25% of households using it. So the rest of the majority of ratepayers are paying for a service that's going down the drain. It's being wasted. It's wasted money. So I'm really disappointed that this has come in this way, in this form, without taking into account the financial aspects of the city, what our ratepayers are telling us. It could easily be put on hold for a couple of years. Let's get the other waste projects sorted, like our collection services, like our sludge minimisation plant, and see how we go with those. But embarking on something new with the high extra cost on ratepayers is not, I just can't believe that that there's a majority going for this, but it does seem very much the Green ideology. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Calvert. Councillor O'Neill.
Ngā mihi nui. I can see that quite a few of us have jumped to attention, I guess, in responding to a couple of the comments already today, but I did want to make the point of the view that's been shared that it'd be cheaper to just pay our way out of climate change instead of dealing with the realities of now. Not only is there a conscious social and cultural and climate impact, but there is also a really strong economic one for Wellington and protecting our natural spaces. Just on the other side of the landfill, we have the world-famous sanctuary Zealandia Te Maraatane. Yeah. Because of the efforts that we have put into our outer green belt to investing in our climate, not selling it off, not putting capitalisation of our land over the people and the taonga of this land, we have one of the only cities in the world where biodiversity is increasing, not decreasing, and a huge part and the bigger picture than profit when making the decision around organics collection was that we weren't wanting to extend the landfill. I know that it seems financially expensive if you only take your measure of cost to be financial, but there is a really strong case and cost that will happen if we do not respond to climate change appropriately, if we do not look into the future. And in fact, putting a financial incentive over one that is long-term for the greater good of not just our natural land, but our generations to come, is short-term thinking. We know that rangatahi, that mana whenua in our rohi, in our area, have made it really clear to us that if we want people to be able to have access to fresh fruit and vegetables, as another speaker has just mentioned, we need to be able to care for our land around that. In order to be sustainable with the way that we grow and the way that Wellington grows, we need to be making these conscious, these difficult decisions now, but ultimately in the long term, we're going to see so many further benefits from this.
Thank you. Councillor McNulty.
Yeah, a few comments today. It's interesting when I talk to people, they ask questions about this council and the way we make decisions, but I really do just try and explain that the central tension of our decisions is short-termism versus long-termism, and they're both rooted in some really fair positions. In the short-termism, rates have increased 30% in 2 years. There's a cost of living crisis. There has been inflation. In the long term, we have existential questions about the viability of parts of our city to build and live in, and we have cost pressures and infrastructure. And it's sort of interesting that, you know, the short and long term does tend to follow a political dichotomy from one side into the other of the aisle. But what I'm saying is I understand where the opposition comes through, but when I was elected in 2022, I told people I'm going to make long-term decisions because the short-termism in Wellington is how we got into a lot of our mess, particularly around infrastructure and water. Voting down this paper actually means you have to confront a really simple question. Do you trust that this council can efficiently and effectively build a new landfill? Because if you do, then vote down this paper. If you have concerns about the ability of this council to build such an infrastructure investment in a timely and affordable manner, we might need to look at stopping things going into that landfill and extending its life. Part of my support here obviously comes around Spicer landfill. This is, yes, Pororo, we own 23% of the facility. It's a great environmental impact example of where current governance doesn't work because the negative externalities of that landfill, which is smell pollution, impact Tawa residents, but there's no one around the PCC table representing them. Yes, Pororo weren't willing to go into the initial proposal because they don't have capex to support the proposal. That was, I've talked to Pororo councillors about the position. They were not in a position to contribute to the construction of a facility. This approach, it has them thinking. So that's, you know, important to note. Councillor Wenera, we'll miss you. Can you stay? Please, just the eloquence, the way you know, I can't. Everything you said, I agree with wholeheartedly, and I'm sad to see you go. You bring such value to this table. I just had to acknowledge that. I know it's not your valedictory, but like ultimately, the RFP for this is really optimistic. It's basically saying, hey, if we can get this pretty, I'm not going to call it a unicorn because it's not there, but if we can get this pretty optimistic outcome and all of these things come together, then yeah, we'll go ahead. And if not, we'll come back and we will talk to councillors. So it's basically, yeah, we'll go ahead if we get a good deal, which we know will be challenging, and if not, we'll come through. And that's really what the decision boils down to at the end of the day. So, look, if you want to go build a new landfill and consign another major infrastructure project and see how that goes for the council, vote this paper down.
Thank you. Councillor Rogers.
Chair, can I call a point of order?
Sure, you can have a go.
I didn't do it halfway through Councillor McNulty's speech to let him finish, but the point of order is about misrepresentation, about if we vote this down, it means that we have faith in the council being able to build efficiently a new landfill. That is absolutely incorrect, and it's a correlation that is incorrect to make. So that is my point of order, misrepresentation.
I don't think that's a misrepresentation, Councillor Calvert, but I think it's an interesting point to raise. So you've raised it, so that's great. Can we just move on to Councillor Rogers, please?
Yeah, I'll speak very briefly because I think one of my favourite things to do is read recommendations, think about them and then vote on them. So I just wanted to bring us a little bit back to the recommendation that's in front of us. I do, in fact, read them with my own eyes.
Point of order, please. I think that was a disrespectful comment suggesting that councillors do not read the recommendations.
I don't think, Councillor Calvert, I think you're being a little bit hypersensitive, and frankly, I think that's slightly odd. But anyhow, Councillor Rogers, you can finish.
I'm happy to instead just highlight a part of the recommendation. The thing that I do really like about this is, and Councillor McNulty talked about the short-term versus long-termism, I think I can see benefits for both here. And that's why it's so weird to hear people say, well, they don't want to vote to spend money when this approves savings beyond what was budgeted for in the LTP. Specifically, the $5.7 million is below what was budgeted for $7.2 million. That's for the operating expenditure. Additionally, the capital is $20 million below what was budgeted in the LTP. So this is both a short-term saving through our operational expenditure and a long-term saving through our capital expenditure. And as other speakers had highlighted too, when you continue to look at a more fulsome picture of the ledger, you then see that we don't have to have a capital expenditure out on the landfill. The other thing around the $4 a bucket being put through, if you do actually multiply that out to the $52 a week and express it in the same form that it is for the collection of organics that we're providing, it comes out to $208 a year, which is more expensive than what we're proposing. So I'm very happy with what staff have recommended for us. It presents savings for everyone involved, and I'm very happy to commend it.
Thank you. Actually, I'll just give you my 5 cents worth. I certainly support the 5 points. I definitely support this recommendation. It strikes me that it is a good example of council officers moving to actually produce a more efficient, lower cost solution to a problem that has been identified. I definitely see it as the least cost option versus do nothing versus do what Councillor Wadera or Abdul Rahman would have us do, which seems to be build our own sort of industry and privatise everything. I mean, privatise, anyhow, own everything. So I think this is a great solution. I think it is, as a person who is lauded by the newspaper as being the councillor who votes against spending the most. I definitely see supporting this initiative as a way of actually burnishing my reputation as a cost cutter. So good on management for coming up with what I look as to a very efficient solution, and I hope you can actually execute it. Is there anybody else who wishes to add 5 cents, 2 cents, 4 cents, 3 cents? We're counting down. Okay, that's it. Right of reply?
Colleagues, you impress me with your ability to debate and interrogate. But no, good on you, and I think that this is what it's about. But I just want to actually, just a couple of things. When I started, we were merely paying $2 million per annum in ETS. That has now reduced because we've managed to capture more gas. But that can be what we're looking forward to if we don't start these mitigations. I also love that it was easy to commit to $35 million in the cost of a new landfill, and there never seems to be any problem finding capital for that. But when we try to find a little bit of money for solutions, there's resistance. Just on the equity issue, that was why I asked that question. I'm very conscious that this is going to be a change for people because it is going to look, result in what will look like a targeted rate increase. But after speaking to Ewan from the Hut, they've been been through this, and they now have an 80% satisfaction rate with the service that they are providing. So really, councillors, and I think we got the commitment, we made the resolution that we will look into a low-cost option for those families that would find this hard in terms of having the smaller amount of waste. So thank you for all of your kōrero today. Just a couple of things. We did put this through our environmental reference group, who also rigorously tested it, but they came out in full support. And the main thing that we must do, this isn't the one solution, and we must keep working alongside our community and community organisations and other innovation systems to try and reduce any resource that can be put out of the landfill somewhere else. So thank you, councillors. Please support it, and thank you to those who are great talk today. Thank you, and officers for the work.
I understand that some people would like to vote on some of these resolutions separately, is that right? Or can we vote for the whole shooting box as one go? Okay, so let's vote on the whole lot. So I now put the motion, which has been moved and seconded. Those in favour, please vote 1, and those against, please vote 2. And we're having a division. And that is passed. Thank you very much. And can we just adjourn now for 5 minutes because we want to get some legal advice? No, because we've only got one topic. So The decision register updates and upcoming reports. Please welcome Liam to introduce the report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let's take the report as read.
Has anyone got any questions? Councillor Randall.
In the June, we had a briefing on the Harbour Quays bus, and at the end of the briefing, it said that there was going to be a report coming to this committee, and yet that's not listed on in there. Where is that at?
It's a different committee. It's the Social and Cultural Committee, I think on the 4th of September.
Oh, so that report's still coming to us?
It is still coming to you, Councillor, yes.
And it's going to Social and?
Cultural. It's a committee of the whole, but it's a social, I think the timing and
okay.
Yeah, stacking the agendas. Thank you.
Councillor Calvert.
Yeah, I just want to know how sort of accurate this is in terms of the upcoming reports, because even the last meeting was in June and the paper we just discussed wasn't on there as coming up this month.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chairman. From time to time, there are additions and deletions from the forward program over a period, and that's usually due to the timing of the information to support the reports or officers' capacity to complete them. So, but I'll take that on notice and ask the team if they can provide you some advice about that matter.
Thank you.
No further questions? In that case, I'm happy to move the motion, and Councillor Matthews is happy to second it. Is there any debate?
Yes. I wanted to acknowledge that it's our last committee meeting, so I'm going to do the Tim Brown finger pointing to thank you for your chairing and to express how much I've enjoyed working with you as your deputy, maybe because of or in spite of your questionable jokes, your extremely lax timekeeping, and your unfamiliarity with standing orders, and your keeping us from having breaks and food. But seriously, I want to say how much I appreciate your incisive leadership, your analytical ability, and your inclusive leadership style. I've learnt a lot from you. I know, again, this is not your valedictory, but it's my chance to say something as your deputy. So thank you, and I think we've been lucky to have your chairing.
Thank you, Tonto.
No, don't say yeah, questionable joke example right there.
Okay, so any debate? No, that was it. I'll put the motion, if we could all vote on that, please. And that is passed. And if you could join me in the karakia to end the meeting, thank you. Urihia, 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 ki. Thank you.